So I'll get this going in just about a minute. Okay.
Stella, I have to say, I always envy where you are participating from. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, right.
He wishes.
That's right. You might think I don't live in Lafayette, but I do.
Well, that's right up by the reservoir.
By the reservoir, yeah.
Yeah, that's the reservoir. That's right.
Yeah. You're in the house of our dreams here, I think.
Yeah.
All right. I think I'll get us going here. So good evening, everyone. I now call the November 16th, 2021
Jim.
meeting of the...
Jim, actually, so Chris was going to start, and then there's a section where we transition.
Okay, I thought, all right. Chris, I'm jumping the gun on you. I'm like taking away your last moment to enjoy being a chair.
Excited.
Oh, I'll just mute myself and go for it.
No, you should.
Okay, so what Jim said, I'd like to call the November 16th meeting of the General Plan Advisory Committee to order. This meeting, I don't have my script with me. This meeting is being also broadcast on the city's YouTube channel. I guess we'll take a roll call.
Carol Singer,
Here,
Namrata Kaslanati,
Hi, here.
Don Jenkins,
Present.
Stella Weatherspoon,
Here.
Matt Pease,
Here.
Beth Needle, Jim Cervantes,
Here.
Here.
Mike Kim,
Here.
Susie Kelly,
Here.
Christine Rasmussen, absent, and Chris Lee,
Here.
Commissioner Radnich, and Mayor Kendall.
Here.
Thank you, everybody.
Great. Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
second,
Great. So the agenda has been adopted. Moving on to public comment. We're going to take public comment now for any item that is not on tonight's agenda. Public comment is 3 minutes long. And if you would like to make a comment, please raise your, use your raise hand feature or press *9 if you're calling in by phone. Sarah, do we have any public comment?
I don't see any hands raised at this time. Give it just a
We'll
minute.
give it a few more seconds. Yeah.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Moving on to number 5. This is where we pass the baton. First, I want to move my camera here so that you can see this beautiful bouquet of flowers that was just delivered to me.
Very nice.
I would like to thank the city and the committee and everyone else who made this experience just incredible. What a tough year to have to start something like this. And so many of us have not had this kind of experience in a normal year, let alone to be working on something so important, so big, so complex, not my specialty, There are very few people on the committee that can say that it does touch their life professionally or personally. And they've been a great help to the committee. I'm thinking of Jim and Mike Kim. And I just want to say that what happened to me over this year was that I became prouder of Lafayette. I started noticing things I never noticed before. I started taking downtown walks and seeing what's changing and imagining what it could look like in a few years. I started reading every article that anybody sent me on housing so I could get up to speed. And I learned more about the history of Lafayette. I had the elders contacting me, and they know who they are, to pass along their wisdom. And that was very special. So I know that Jim and Matt will do a great job, but I also know that the committee will do a great job in the next year. So thank you again. And I will take my seat as the at-large member.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Bravo.
Yes. Class act, Chris.
Class act. Oh, class act all the way. And if I could just make one comment, I mean, Chris, I think you have set the gold standard here. It's going to be challenging to sort of step in right after you, and I will do my best. I have your cell phone number, so I think if I am in a pinch, I'll likely call you up. But, you know, just leading us through this first effort with such, you know, balance and grace and just wisdom, I think has been a huge help for this group. And especially, you know, when you think that we're all here on Zoom, you know, this is just not the way things would have been normally, but honestly, it's like you just power through it all. So I think we as a committee all owe you a real debt of thanks, and really the community does too, I think. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And I think there's one other item in that you have the lovely flowers, and I think there's one other item there.
Yes, there is. And buy local.
Yeah.
Is a bottle of wine from Deer Hill Vineyards, which I'm not sure will ever be drunk, but anyway, it looks very good.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
No. So again, thank you so much. I don't know if anything else that other folks would like to add, or before we kind of move on to the housing element.
I'm going to just quickly, I wanted to publicly thank you, Chris, for really reaching out and being so approachable and helping me when I was struggling there a few months back, and, you know, just being a friend, going for a walk with me around the neighborhood and including me in things and keeping me in the loop. So I just appreciate that, because it really helped me get back on the mend and really feel a part of the group.
Oh, you're welcome, Susie. Thanks.
I'd also like to add, even though I wasn't able to sign your card and all of that, I'd just really like to thank you so much for leading us this year. And yeah.
Oh, thanks, Namratha. I know I'm going to be reading about you in the future. I don't know what it will be about, but it'll be something great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad you're sticking around, Chris. So you're not done with us all yet. And we will certainly look for your input as the at-large member. It'll be really important as we continue the effort going forward. And maybe with that, the next item on the agenda was the commissioner activity reports. So maybe just take a pause here to see if any members of the committee have activity reports that they would like to pass on to the group.
I do have one.
Oh, I'll take Don, and then Matt and Namratha, and then Susie and Stella.
Okay, me first?
Please go ahead.
Yeah. On the 15th of November, I attended the area aging council on aging housing discussion, which is a county program, and learned that they are dealing in the county with the same issues that we are. They're responsible for finding 7,600 units within the whole county, which I thought was interesting. They have the same issues as far as SB 9 and 10 that we're dealing with. And they are talking about the idea that seniors in this county are becoming an ever larger percentage of the population. And so many of the seniors in the county are on fixed income, and with rents continuing to climb, more and more seniors are becoming homeless. And so this is an area that they're focused on. I think that I will, they meet only once a month, and I will listen in and be happy to share. But we are part of a larger organization, or part of a cog in the big wheel of what's going on. And it is critical that we deal with some of these issues right here locally. But I was surprised that, frankly, the county only had to deal with 7,600 units, and we get 2,100. So that was interesting to me. Okay.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I just want to make a clarification. In the package of public comments that were sent out for all of us, there was an email from Jeremy Levine dated November 15th in the morning. And in that, Jeremy had made an apology to Mayor Kendall regarding some comments that he made in our last meeting or several meetings ago. And he talked about thanking myself and Jim for contacting him after the meeting to help him understand why his comments were inappropriate in a private conversations. And Jim and I did not meet with him directly. I sent him an email during the meeting pointing out that there was probably a better way to make those comments. He replied back to me that he agreed and would take appropriate action. But I just want to make sure that there was clarity in what happened in that email. So that was it.
Thank you, Matt. Amratha?
Yeah, a couple of things. There was a youth commission meeting last week, I think, and I did debrief about what we're doing with housing and the mission statement. And then I also wanted to mention that there is outreach currently going on at Akalani's with the mission statement. And I mean, I guess Renata could elaborate a little bit more on that, but that's happening right now. They're taking a survey and they're giving feedback on that this week. So we'll have that pretty soon.
Great. Thank you. Susie?
Oh, I thought I was still on mute. So mine is coming from the downtown neighborhoods, stemming from the last week of October. We've noticed that there were a lot of real estate agents who are listing houses as, fun fact, it's multi-residential, and it just became a zoo on our street in particular. And neighbors were very, very concerned about this because issues were not mentioned in the listing as far as parking, access, or privacy. So even though they can build these homes, by not disclosing everything, it just really became a zoo. Driveways were blocked. 3 people walked into one of the neighbors' houses, started looking around her house before she said, "This is not the open house." And she has young children. So we feel that the real estate agents, one, need to disclose everything, but also ensure that, you know, they're there for the listing, that people are parking where they're supposed to, because if they're buying these homes, they need to be aware of what restrictions there are. For instance, ours is a private street, so it is not open parking there. It's a difficult lot that they're selling. It's a flag lot, so there are some access issues. But I think that they've just kind of grabbed onto this mandate and being like, woohoo, we can, hey, you know, it's a big lot that's for sale. And so the problem is it's making the neighbors very distrustful of the city and what agenda is being pushed. And so I promised I would bring this report in and hope that we could get some clarity on it in the future. I know we can't stop people from listing it that way, but like I said, maybe they can be more open and we can have a conversation with the neighbors. And, you know, if they do contact, that they felt that they're being heard, because these are established neighborhoods and we're open to change, but not immediate. We don't want, you know, a 4-story complex where we're all single family, single level homes, and now they're right in our backyard. Trees were taken down that were not supposed to be taken down. There was a small fine, but you know, there's these concerns that things are being allowed for these developers that wouldn't be allowed, because a lot of the neighbors are renovating their homes and they're not getting the same treatment. They're jumping through a lot of hoops and a lot of paperwork, a lot of money for things, and they feel that the developers are having a much easier time. So I'm just sharing this as our experience that I did experience firsthand. My car was blocked because everybody was so anxious to go look at the open house. They weren't even paying attention, which is a little bit scary. So that's what was happening in our neighborhood.
Could you give us the address?
Well, the address is on West Road. So it's a great place. It's right across the street. It is within walking distance to the downtown, which I guess they would say they don't need parking, but they did all come in cars. So it's just one of those, and they don't understand, even though there's signage that says no parking, they're not understanding that that means them. So yeah.
Susie, I'd love to reach out with you and meet with you and the neighbors and understand the situation further.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Great. Thanks, Susie. Stella?
Yeah, our update is the Transportation Circulation Commission met 2 weeks ago to review the memo that staff gave about the program review, as well as to discuss the mission statement. We had a good, robust, probably about an hour-long discussion and submitted comments to the subcommittee.
Okay, thank you. Christine?
Hi there. I had a short meeting at the beginning of the month with Save Lafayette to discuss the mission statement and also talk about community outreach. So it was a brief but helpful meeting.
Great, thank you very much. Carol?
Yes, last Wednesday was the PTR meeting, and we had a staff report from Sarah with the attachments of the goals and the mission statement, and our new chair kindly attended and participated in the discussion, and we provided comments to GPAC on the housing goals and the mission statement.
Thank you, Carol. Any other reports? Christine, I think your hand's still up.
Jim, did you want to talk about our meeting with Elliot?
Yeah, I want to make sure that everyone else is set. Okay. Yeah, so just a couple of things from me, one of which is Matt and I had a coffee with Elliot Hudson, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago, to get more in detail some of his comments and observations on the mission statement draft. It was a very helpful conversation, and it just makes you realize how smart and thorough and caring people are in the community. So it was a really a good chance to sort of get his perspective. And I noticed he's got some additional public comment as well, but I wanted to sort of flag that for the group. And as Carol mentioned, I did sit in on the PTR committee, and I'm not sure who has more fun, us or them, but it was a good session, and I actually learned a lot by just being there. Trying to think of any other comments from committee members before we move on. Okay, so then we'll move on to, we have two discussion items. The first regards community outreach or community outreach subcommittee. And let me tee this up, which is kind of after our last session, Christine reached out to me. We had a good conversation on the topic of outreach for the sort of neighborhood representatives of the GPAC in terms of what we were doing, ideas. The thought was, well, maybe it might be good to sort of like try to figure out how to do this better. Kind of in the similar time frame, Carol had raised a couple of questions with respect to commissioner representatives. And it seemed like one way, being mindful of what's coming up, which is further work on the housing element, which we've got to get to the planning commission. We're going to go back to opportunity sites, and then there's RENA. And which means that outreach is just critical for us in the beginning of the next year. And given how full our plate is with just the housing element, it seemed one way to address the topic of outreach and maybe come up with some ideas, approaches, best practices, whatever you want to call it, would be to get a subcommittee together to sort of focus on that, with the idea that they could come back early next year, maybe January, we'll see how it goes, to make suggestions as to how the neighborhood representatives can maybe we can be more thorough about it. And maybe with respect to commissioner representatives, after a year of doing this, are there things we've learned that we can maybe do better? So that was the idea behind all this. So when we get to the end, I'd like to get a subcommittee off the ground. But before we do that, I think the protocol would be questions. And then let me ask for clarification for Sarah. Would we do a public comment after that point and then discussion? Is that our sequence here?
Yep, for each item, yes.
Okay, so I think the first thing would just be questions. And Carol, I see you have your hand raised. So it'd be questions on the topic. We'll have public comments and then discussion.
Well, I'd just like to point out what the problems I have seen have been with our housing element, and I assume it will be with all the other elements. So I do agree with Jim, we do need to establish a protocol. How do we fit in the schedule for our review of goal policies and programs into commission schedules? Now, for instance, for this last one, I think, correct me, Don, if I'm wrong, I think Don gave to his commission the October 19th staff report and attached materials. Then is that correct, Don? Yeah, and then the Transportation Commission had a staff report from Jonathan Fox with attached materials. And the comments on the housing were to receive and file. Then Park and Rec came next, and I wanted our comments to go to GPAC. We talked about it with staff. So Sarah Allen wrote our staff report and attached the same materials. But the recommendation on ours was to discuss and provide comments to GPAC. So here right away, you have 3 different approaches at 3 different times. So what I was after is to standardize. Either we have one staff report on all these programs and policies. It goes to each of the groups, including the neighborhood groups, because I think Christine had another set that she presented to her neighborhood group. So we're all reaching out at different times. And I think the feedback should be organized so it all comes at the same time. Now, when I brought this up at the last meeting, I think it was, Sarah mentioned that if we did not get our comments in, they would be attached to GPAC's final approval and go to the Planning Commission. But I'd like to have reassurance that the Planning Commission is all right with that. In other words, they will get a final approved goals and policies from GPAC, but attached to it will be comments from the commissions who did not get in time for the process. So it's a little bit complicated, but that's the question. How are we going to organize this outreach? So I think a little bit, and I think it needs to be done pretty soon because we are moving down the path already. We have several goals already. So that's the problem. And how are we going to organize it? It includes the groups too, because if all the neighborhood groups get in before the commissions, and I'm including in there the chamber and the nonprofits. In other words, the where people are supposed to represent a group, not just what they think. Particularly, the material is getting rather specific. You know, what do you think about, you know, these programs? So number one, I think it needs to be clear what each group is supposed to comment upon. And I know staff is just working like crazy, but another thing I think would be helpful is to have things called the same thing. I've had, I don't know about all of you, but I'm not that organized. I've had a lot of trouble with some. Like here on our agenda, it says 7B, Housing Needs and Background Data Executive Summary. But that's not what it is. If you look at the attachment, it's a narrative summary. And so, and that's what it's called, the narrative summary. And I've got a list of about 12 of these things. I know it's clear to staff, but to those of us, or maybe it's just me, I like to have the same document called the same thing so I can find it. So that would be another thing. So I just, I wasn't sure how many of you are all aware of how this feedback outreach has gone so far.
So I think the idea with the agenda topic is to get a subcommittee together to really work through the nitty-gritty on this, where we've got a template to address it in a consistent way going forward. Maybe we got a lot of time for people to do their work, and we've got Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up. But I think my sense would be maybe in January have something so we can really be able to offer something consistent. I think that'd be much more efficient than tying down time in a general GPAC session to do that. But those are really good observations, Carol. And I see Chris has got a hand up. Please.
The other group that we've been wrestling with for almost a year is how to categorize and reach out to stakeholders and make sure that the stakeholder is a legitimate contributing stakeholder, et cetera, and establish communication with them. And one, I don't know if this has been settled yet, but at some point it came up that not only should we be talking with Lafayette residents, but we should be talking with people who own property in Lafayette but don't live here. So that, I guess, would be another group that we should be trying to reach out to.
Is that a stakeholder group under the chamber? Or?
I'm not sure under the chamber, but they're in the city records. Sarah, how would they show up?
You're talking about the chamber itself? Matt is the representative for the chamber.
Oh no, about people who own property in Lafayette but don't live here.
So we did the direct door mailings for the I mean, I guess they would have to have subscribed to our agendas and stuff, but we did do the direct door mailings, which would go to property owners, not necessarily just residents. It went to every door in the 94549 area code.
Okay.
Okay. Any other kind of questions on the topic before we move to public comment?
Could I just ask a quick question?
Please, Don.
Yes. Sarah, how would we take that information? You're talking about absentee landowners or landlords? Or are you talking about business people that work here, but they work in Lafayette, but they don't live in Lafayette? Or are you talking about both of those?
The latter. So it's the physical address. So it would be the folks that that work in Lafayette or own a business in Lafayette, but don't necessarily live here.
Okay. Any other questions on the topic?
Is that a distinction, though, Sarah? A person who does not live here but has a business versus has a property. Is there a distinction there for us or not? A business owner versus a property owner.
That was my question.
Correct. So the way that we did the advertising was a direct door mailing. So that went directly to the physical address, so not the property owner specifically, unless, you know, they were forwarded by the person who resides at the parcel or on the specific address.
Okay, so I mean, are we concerned about, because those who own property pay local taxes? Is that the distinction that we're making? And those are the voices that we're more concerned about versus those who may work here. Like I'm a barista at Starbucks, but I live in Richmond, you know, does that voice count equally as a taxpayer? I don't think it does it?
So we'll take direction from GPAC. Ultimately, we could send out a notice to maybe sign up for the e-notifications, sending those to actual property owners, because we do have access to that with our GIS system. But just the way that Vistas goes out or other direct door mailings just goes to the physical property address.
I need to jump in here because I think I have some information that I think will help clarify some things and also actually expand what this this potential subcommittee will do. We are required by law to reach out to homeowners, but renters as well. And we are required to reach out to underserved populations, including lower income households, many of whom may not speak English. We will have to have a robust community engagement platform that will get at those households that are typically underrepresented. Specifically, when we get to affirmatively furthering fair housing, the onus is on the city to actually do as much as possible to reach out to these underrepresented groups. It's great to get input from homeowners and people who own property, but renters in the terms of state law are just as important to reach out to, and in fact have a greater disadvantage when it comes to housing in the state, which is why they are specifically called out as a group of people that must be reached out to. So one of the things that we have to do is look at some data to determine where there may be pockets of households of various lower income levels and specifically target those neighborhoods through a variety of canvassing efforts that may not be in the sort of traditional sense of let's write them a letter, but actually show up where they congregate. For example, putting notices in the community rooms at apartment buildings and things like that. So there's that whatever we do is going to have to be a lot broader than just people who own here in the community. We need to, and who may be older than, the population is typically a little bit older here than it is in other locations. So we'll have to reach out to younger people. And I think the one thing that I need to say is that the timeline is such because of how we have to get a draft housing element together. I think that January is going to be too late to create this analysis, to create this subcommittee and to have a plan in place. I really think that it's going to have to be completed, at least pull together a community engagement plan in December at the latest. Obviously, it's the latest because we're almost at the end of November. But I think that January is too late.
Okay, thank you, Diana. Mayor Kendall?
Yeah, so Diana, when you say we're legally required to do this, what exact pieces have to have this level of communication in this process?
We have to reach out to historically underrepresented communities in both the communication about the housing element and planning, but in specific with the affirmatively furthering fair housing requirements. There's a detailed list of things that we have to do that's written into state law.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. Carol, I see your hand up.
I'm thinking. Is this following Mayor Candel's comment? Is this just for housing, or will this be for all elements?
What I'm talking about is only about the housing element, and it's affirmatively furthering fair housing. There are no other requirements specific other than the standard sort of CEQA review that needs to be done for other parts of the elements of the general plan. Everything is very spelled out for the housing element, whereas it's not in other elements of the general plan.
Okay, so our outreach could reflect this in that maybe some way the input from commissions and the from all the groups could just I don't know what, all come in and go to the planning commission or something like that. I don't know.
I think Diana, thank you for raising this point. And it sounds like for the city's sake, it'd be good that we could demonstrate that we've charted out an outreach program. It just gives us a big checkbox with HCD, I would think. And that's important. Any other questions on the topic from committee members before I turn it over for public comment? And then we'll go back to discussion and we can move on. Seeing no hands raised. Sarah, Renata, are there any hands raised from members of the public on this to provide public comment?
Yes, if you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen or *9 if you're calling in. David Clark is coming in now.
Hi, everybody. Dave Clark. I was going to say something about this in the public comment section, and I let it go. Commissioner Singer has been so dogged about it, though, that I feel compelled to offer something. And I want you to know this is not a complaint, so please don't take it that way. I'm trying to pass on some information that may be helpful. But our next Creeks Committee meeting is tomorrow night. So, and it's the last Creeks Committee meeting before the City Council meeting, where a lot of the things we're going to discuss tonight and that you're asking feedback for will be discussed, if not decided. So we've got one bite of the apple tomorrow night based on information that may come up in your meeting tonight. So we've tried to handle that. We've tried to handle that. I want to try to give you an understanding of what the information flow is and how it's hard to follow sometimes. I attend a lot of meetings, as probably some of you know. I mean, you see me on a lot of these things. So I happened to attend a TransCirc meeting. There was something on that agenda that I thought might impact the Creeks, and that's when the letter that Jonathan Fox was part of the staff that wrote to the TransCirc committee was part of the staff report. Were part of the agenda items for that meeting. I read it. I said, "Oh, that's great," and it was very detailed about when you were asking for comments with respect to tonight for programs that didn't exist yet because they weren't going to be disclosed until the agenda for this meeting came up. So there were dates in the future on that letter after which you would be asking for public input for the programs. I said, okay. And Stella, Commissioner Witherspoon and I had a conversation to confirm what those dates were. And I said, fine, so we're going to work with that. I also attended the meeting that Carol referenced, Commissioner Singer referenced at PTNR, where there was also a letter. It was essential from Sarah Allen. That letter was largely a cut and paste. There were some differences. The dates were not there. So now I've got these two letters. Remember, the Creeks, we don't have a seat at the table on GPAC. So the only way that we can keep up with this is however we can. So now I've got these two letters to try to reconcile, and they're both slightly different. So I think my point is the way that the information flow has happened for us is is primarily because I attend a lot of meetings and I hear a lot of these things and I try to follow up on each one of them to see how best to respond to them. And I understand we're all moving with, trying to move quickly, and the scheduling is a problem, but just FYI, I'm just speaking for that one group. So others may be out there, if they don't attend as many meetings as I do, I'm not sure that they're getting all of the pieces of information. So, from a time, if it could all flow through one place, that might be one way to kind of control the information so everybody's seeing the same thing. I don't know what form that would take, but if so, as I said, if that's helpful, great. If not, then I'm done anyway, but thank you.
Thank you, David. Any other comments of the public, Sarah?
Elliot Hudson and then Don Eames.
Okay.
Hello, am I up?
Yeah.
Okay,
You're up.
I just clicked to join at the when you called me. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Cervantes and Mr. Peace for meeting with me. I truly appreciate that. On this item, just very quickly, I want to clarify that the subcommittee for community outreach is going to deal with future issues. After all of the outreach and work that's gone into the vision and mission statements up to this point, I don't think it would be fair or right to undo all that work and do it all over again. So I would appreciate that clarification.
Agreed.
If I could interject, I agree with that 100%. We're really looking at going forward. That would be my take on this.
Thank you.
Okay. Don Eames will be joining the meeting. There's a little box that you need to accept the invitation.
Sorry, okay, I'm okay now. I just wanted to go back to what Chris had mentioned about property owners not being notified, or I guess that's part of your list, Sarah, that you mentioned that only 549 people were contacted, and I live out of town, so I never got contacted and I never received the mailing, and I don't receive any of the lists either. So I think it's important that property owners are included, and they are, according to Diana Elrod, are basically underrepresented. So I think an outreach as an automatic should be included for any kind of outreach activity to get input for the general plan activities. Thank you.
Robert Lavoie is coming in.
There are any other public comments? And by the way, Don, thank you very much.
Robert Lavoie is and is coming in.
Hello. Is this the appropriate time to comment on the housing needs background data executive summary?
That will come up later.
Okay. All right. Then
we're talking about the sort of outreach, the idea of an outreach subcommittee.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Libby Henry.
Hi, I don't know why my computer takes so long to connect. Thank you for taking, I just wanted to second what Don Eames just said about the outreach for property owners. And to say that I hope that you will consider that when you organize your subcommittee and contact us. And that's all. Thank you very much. And thank you all for all your hard work.
Right. Thank you, Libby. Any additional comments?
Don't see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, so I'll take it back to GPAC for discussion. And
I do have one more, just it keeps flashing. Lynn, if you'd like to make a comment, please keep your hand up. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. So I think the protocol here is to bring it back for discussion. And it sounds like from the various questions and comments raised by members of the GPAC and from our public input, there are a number of items out there that we should be thinking through in the way of doing outreach. And maybe what I'll do here is I see a couple of hands raised. So let me pass, I've got Matt and then Carol, and we'll commence our discussion of this topic. So Matt, please, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I guess in light of Diana's comments, maybe, Jim, I might offer a suggestion is that we bifurcate the approach and look at the housing discussion over the next 3 to 4 weeks, and try to design an outreach strategy that will make sure that we meet state requirements and we're as inclusive as possible. And then when we complete that, then do the broader question of how do we replicate this on a consistent basis as we go through the other sections of the GPAC charter. And they may look quite different, given the fact that from what Diana is saying, we need to be super careful about inclusion and make sure that we do everything correctly. We should do it correctly all the time, I guess, but it sounds like given the urgency, maybe we ought to just narrow this down for the housing piece. You get some volunteers together, they can work with staff and maybe Diana and try to cobble this together very quickly so that we do an effective job over the next few weeks. That's it.
Thank you, Matt. Carol?
Well, I do agree. It seems as if we need to have a process we could put in place right now so we could move forward. I do like the idea, I think it was David Clark, of suggesting we have maybe one staff report and a stack of material, whatever is attached to that, and that could be made available to everyone. Now, I didn't even think of stakeholders because again, we've been directed at times to just contact our constituencies, which have been taken to mean the neighborhood groups. And then at other times it says constituencies and commissions without the committees in there. So I think we need to, decide who we are contacting. And I didn't even think about the stakeholders because they've never been mentioned as people we should contact. There are 55 of them. So that's a pretty big list. But if there was one staff report and one set of attachments that somehow everyone could be notified to access if their groups and including stakeholders wanted to make comments, it would all be out there. Just a suggestion. You could implement that sort of right away.
My recollection is that we do have a sort of a spreadsheet that staff put together back in the spring when we were launching the community engagement program, where people could indicate which groups they could outreach to. I put down St. Perpetua Church because I'm a parishioner, but that's a resource, and maybe that's worth bringing that up again to see if it's effective. And maybe that's something the subcommittee could take a good look at. Your point's well taken, Carol. Any other comments or discussion on this? Chris, I see your hand up.
I was also thinking that HOAs are great umbrella organizations for homeowner groups, and this would help the community or the neighborhood committee members, if they haven't already, that they get acquainted with either the umbrella organization, as some neighborhoods have, with little HOAs under it, or just the various HOAs that operate independently within a neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they are on the stakeholder list, aren't they?
The Lafayette Homeowners Council is on the stakeholders list.
So I'd just like to clarify that we started with an initial list of kinds of stakeholders, and then staff went through and pulled out individual organizations, and we've also been collecting emails through our workshops and other outreach activities, folks who send in public comment. And so we have over 1,300 people on our email list, and that includes churches, PTAs, all the HOAs contacts are in there. So I do just want to clarify that we do have that contact information. We use that when we send out notices, and we can make that available to the subcommittee or any GPAC members.
Great. And I think the schools are on that list too, right?
Okay.
Great. So it sounds like a lot of the information that is needed to do this outreach on a more personal basis is already there. Good. Thank you.
Mayor Kendall?
Yeah, so Diana, is the content of this, are these staff reports for our meetings sufficient? I mean, I'm trying to not create a whole bunch of new work. And so if we just send out our staff reports for our meetings, does that fulfill our obligation?
No. We need to reach out to people to find out we have a number of different people and organizations at play. Some of them are stakeholder types. That would also include like service providers like legal aid, EBHO, various other organizations that address lower income households' concerns. And then there are the people themselves who are the residents. That EBHOs and the organizations could receive certainly documentation, but the specific requirement to reach people is more linked to what is your housing concern, understand what their needs are, so that we can advise them, partly that there are services available to them, but also to get them, if they're interested in participating in the process. For example, if 35 people show up to a meeting or send in a comment after we've reached out to them that they'd like to buy homes, could we have a first-time home buyers program? That's something that maybe we would not have gotten. I think we would, but there's those kinds of things that people will share what their actual needs are, and that the city can craft programs to address it.
So is there a boilerplate? I'm trying to not create a whole bunch of work. So I'm trying to get to the boilerplate.
There is no boilerplate. Every jurisdiction does it differently. I definitely I'm happy to borrow from other clients that I work with. San Mateo has a very extensive outreach program. They show up at farmers market, to the several Hispanic grocery stores, do leafleting, those kinds of things, where they reach out to people and ask them with surveys asking what their concerns are. So the actual choices of how we do this is more than just giving somebody a staff report. It's that plus this other stuff that's actually reaching people who are impacted.
Okay.
Carol, I see your hand up again.
Yeah, well, listening to Diana, it seems to me the subcommittee needs to meet with Diana and find out exactly what we need to do. This is a whole different angle of anything we've heard.
Right. Staff, we've been discussing this internally about now that we've gotten certain aspects of the housing element under on a roll. And we've been recently discussing some of the things that we need to put together, which would perfectly roll into this subcommittee's work. So it's not like we're completely reinventing the wheel. The staff has really been working on this already. It's just a matter of, what is the best implementation, which we hadn't gotten to.
Thanks. And Mike, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so very early on, when we first started meeting, we all agreed to have a website dedicated as a one-stop place where every stakeholder can get updated on what's going on. So the question, Diana, is our website that we have, planlafayette.org, is that sufficient in directing all the stakeholders to so they can get timely updates?
Yes, it potentially speaking, but we need to make sure that we have materials that would be in, for example, languages like Spanish and perhaps Chinese, to direct them to the website. These are groups typically that don't participate in civic engagement activities. And so we in order to get them to do that, we have to provide them with the reasons why they want to do this and provide access to it, not necessarily directly access, but let them know how they can get information interpreted for them. I'm going to go back to San Mateo because their process is expansive, and they're doing it in conjunction with a huge general plan update, which is not like this general plan update. And they are actually doing a lot of documentation and writing in various languages to go target these groups. I don't necessarily think that that's something that we need to do, but we have to be able to reach out to people who traditionally don't participate so that they can participate, that they know that we want them to participate.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I've got 3 hands up, and then I'd like to see if we can move on because we've got a lot of other stuff to do tonight. And I see Mayor Kendall, Don Jenkins, and Carol Singer. And unless anyone's got something pressing after that, I think we should move on the topic. Mayor Kendall has taken her hand down. Thank you. Mike, your hand's still up. You're done now, right? Okay. Carol, your hand's up.
Yes, I just wanted to be sure, do I understand these are 2 separate avenues? How we are going to communicate and get the feedback from our groups, the groups behind each GPAC member, and that's specific comments on the housing goals, policies as we go along. Seems to me that's completely different than what Diana is talking about. Do I have that right? Because we could still need to develop something so we get input from the groups behind each member of GPAC. Do I have that correct?
Well, there are other groups that are not behind the members of GPACs that also has to be outreach to, like service providers, legal aid, et cetera. I don't think anybody on the GPAC is, represents kind of lower income service provider groups. So it's those things that you are personally connected with, but it's also broader than that in terms of what we have to do.
Well, I understand that, but I'm thinking what I've understood you wanted comments on the goals, policies, and programs is something I don't know how somebody who speaks Spanish, the groups Diana's talking to wouldn't even know what that's being talked about. So that's a different outreach.
Yes. What we're talking about this subcommittee is a sort of a broadly written outreach, maybe not necessarily just goals, policies, and programs, but that might be included in part of it.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to differentiate because that's where I've had the problem with our groups, our commissions.
The kernel of this, as I was thinking about it, is it's the housing element, goal, policies, programs, but which we'll be working on in the first part of 2022. We're working on it now, actually. But we're going to get back to the opportunity sites, and we're going to get back to RENA. So if we all thought that the mission statement was a big effort, I suspect Reno will be something bigger than that. So I think the thought was to have really, if we can get our outreach organized to make sure we really do connect with the community, that's important. Donnie, you've raised some, really important elements here that frankly weren't on my radar screen. But we need to address, because we need to do this right for HCD. Otherwise, we don't want to create issues. So I think that by having a subcommittee focus on this, and to Matt's suggestion, maybe starting off with making sure that we can come up with approaches to address the affirmative fair housing requirements would be the first bite at the apple for this group. And the second would be outreach to our various constituencies. How can we improve that given our year's experience? And maybe the third thing would be making sure that we haven't overlooked stakeholder groups. There was an effort, as I think I related in the spring, where we tried to do that in advance of the community engagement sessions, but that we probably may need to tune back into that again. So I think it comes back to getting a group to focus on this, because otherwise we could probably chew up a bunch of GPAC sessions just on this and not even get to the housing element. So I would suggest, so I don't know if I need a motion on this, or I can call for one, but the nub of it is that a group of 3, maybe 4 GPAC members to form a subcommittee to address outreach, to make sure that to address our outreach for our affirmative fair housing requirements, outreach to our various constituencies, how we might improve that, and then examine outreach to stakeholder groups that may not be in the first 2 categories. That's really rough, but that's kind of the gist of it, I think. So I don't know if I need a motion to that effect, but Sarah, I'm kind of looking at you here. It might be good to do that. Okay, I'm seeing a nod from the mayor, so I'm going to go with that. So I'd like to see if I could get a motion to the effect that we form a subcommittee to address the 3 topics I raised. Matt Peace, I see your hand.
I will make that motion.
Thank you. Motion made by Matt Peace. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Carol. Motion made. Okay, got this. So I think we need to do a roll call on the motion.
We do, but I would actually, I might suggest if you get the volunteers right down.
Okay.
Like who is going to be on
the Coalition of the Willing. So I'm getting some feedback on someone's line here. We could just mute. So I'm happy to name folks, but if there are individuals who would like to make a contribution to the broader effort by joining the subcommittee, it would be much appreciated. It's important work, as we've discussed here in this part of the session. Anyone interested? Carol's got her hand up. Thank you. Chris, thank you. Christine, great. Okay, I've got 3. Anyone else? Okay, so Beth, thank you. Great. So I got 4. So Carol, Beth, Chris, and Christine as volunteers for the committee. And maybe we can vote on the motion to form this committee with those 4 members to approach those 3 topics we just discussed: the affirmative fair housing requirements or approach, improving outreach to our constituencies, and making sure that we've got appropriate outreach to stakeholder groups that are not in the first 2 groups. Now, maybe if I get staff to call the roll on the motion.
Was there a motion and a second?
Yeah, there's a motion made by Matt, seconded by Carol.
Okay, sorry.
Yep.
All right. Carol Singer?
Aye.
Namrata Castellanti?
Yes.
Don Jenkins? You're muted, Don.
Yes.
Thank you. Stella Witherspoon?
Aye.
Matt Pease?
Yes.
Beth Needle?
Yes.
Jim Cervantes?
Yes.
Mike Kim,
Yes.
Susie Kelly,
Yes.
Christine Rasmussen,
Aye.
and Chris Lee.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Motion carries. Thank you, volunteers. You got some wood to chop. And, you know, I think it'd be, to Diana's point, trying to get our hands around the affirmative fair housing requirements first will be really important. And then following that would be the other effort. And so that would be much appreciated. And we'll maybe connect after this to sort of talk about timeline, but I think it'd be good to get an update report in December. Okay, well, we have.
Could I just ask, will this be recorded, or, I mean, can we meet together? Do we have to meet on Zoom if we didn't want to? Is it a notice meeting, or?
I think I have an answer for that, but Sarah, you're the better person to respond.
It's just it would just be an ad hoc committee for a very short period of time. So we wouldn't do noticing for subcommittee meetings. We could meet in person if we wanted to. I could reserve the city office, the room in the city offices.
We can use the library as well if we want to have a meeting.
Good. Okay. I think we can move on to our second discussion topic, which is the housing element, housing needs and data, background data executive summary or narrative summary. And so I think Sarah or Renata, I pass this to you just for the kind of update.
Yep, and we're just gonna, so you've seen this a couple of times before. You saw it as an outline and then a draft, and then committee members provided additional comments. Staff has incorporated as many comments as we could into this revised draft. And so we're looking for a motion this evening to forward this to the Planning Commission for their review. If you do have any modifications that you would like to make, we would ask that you just discuss them this evening. And if you all can agree, you can make them part of the motion and we can adjust that before it goes to the Planning Commission.
So we'll have questions on this, public comment, and then discussions. I see a hand raised, Matt Peace.
Yeah, quick thing. I've sent an email to Sarah. There were a couple of typos or formatting issues, and I'm assuming those will be incorporated in the final version.
Yes, they will.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Okay. Any other questions on the topic? Stella.
Yeah, thank you. I had sent a comment in regarding school funding, and I just wanted to make a correction. What I submitted said Lafayette School Districts, but I was told that it's only the Lafayette School District, not Akalani's Union High School District. So I would suggest a revision to that note, that footnote, just to say capital letters Lafayette School District as an entity.
Thank you. Christine, and then Mayor Kendall.
Okay, so if we had like little things, do you want us to send those to you, or you want me to tell you right now? Because I just saw a couple little things in here that I thought might be helpful.
I would suggest, sorry.
Go ahead, what?
I was going to say, I have a bunch of things too. I've scribbled on this. I'm just going to send those into staff directly. I think these are bigger picture comments.
Bigger pictures. Okay, so I guess it kind of is a bigger picture one. So in the description, the city is constrained by a variety of topographical and environmental conditions. And it says, for example, much of the city's beautiful hillsides are difficult to build on. Could we be more specific on that, like steep and slide prone, and maybe get rid of beautiful? But I feel like, why are they difficult? And I think it would be better if you kind of explained why. So I'm assuming it's steep and slide prone. And I don't know, is earthquake a problem here? Like, do we have to worry about earthquake? So I think that needs to be in there. I think it's really important. But get rid of beautiful, because I mean, that's eye and beholder. So I think that just makes it sound like we're trying to say beautiful hillsides, when in fact, there are actually real reasons why building on these hillsides is difficult. As a matter of fact, there was a property I was looking at on the hillside, and it was a slide, no one would buy it. So if we could write steep and slide prone, earthquake threatened, or whatever. The other thing I had a question about was a lot of this is based on, and I know Mayor Kandel brought this up at some point too, when we talked about what the effects were of the COVID on business and working from home and that kind of thing. And some of the things, increased traffic congestion caused by long commutes and fewer people, being able to meet homes or purchase homes or surging rents, and that direction, wondering how much of the fallout from the COVID and different working ways of working is changing the area around here. So I'm not really sure. Sometimes I'm looking at some of these things and wondering, are people definitely moving more into this area? Are they moving out? And I know they've got these big plans for Bay Area 2050, but we, like I always harp on this before, we really haven't gotten the 2020 census data back yet either. And then the last comment I had was in the back on page 9, there's mention of low income or lower end jobs with lower salaries, I guess in the lower income area. And I'm assuming they're more service industry, restaurant and that kind of thing. And I wanted to know how many of these jobs are actually filled by high school students and college students who are really not, they're living at home with their parents. Because I know, for example, when I go to the yogurt shack there with my kids, I don't think all those people are young people. I don't see them, they're high schoolers. So can we differentiate between how many of those kids aren't, they are low income, obviously, because they're, part-time or, they're making $15 an hour, whatever it is, but they're certainly not supporting a family on it.
We don't have any way to parse out that data. It doesn't exist.
So is there any way we can notate that we have a lot of that, or do we have a lot of that?
It would be completely conjecture. I don't have any way to know that.
And so we can't support it if we said it.
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Mayor Kandel.
Yeah, just very quickly, on the bottom of, just actually on the first page, there's a comment in the last paragraph. It says, over the last decade, housing production in Lafayette has increased significantly. And the city's issued building permits for only 6,000 in 2010. And that figure rose to, 86. Can we put a plot in there? It's always just so much easier just to look at a graph, right? And just show the increase. It'd just be much more impactful even than just saying it. And that would kind of go with, like, when are we going to fill in all those blanks? And is it going to come? It comes back to us before it has to be. All these blanks will be filled in before it goes to planning, right? That's the process. Is that how this works?
So in theory, we're trying to get this to planning commission since they need to start looking at it. So
with the blanks, what do we do about blanks?
Well, those blanks would be filled in before it goes to planning commission. It's empirical data, so I don't know that it would change necessarily, but we certainly could add a graph to show the numbers more graphically.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Don Jenkins and then Stella.
My concern is it appears that all of my age-friendly questions have been kind of removed, and you're not discriminating negatively, but you're not saying anything positive about our seniors. And I would like to see something more included. We had something in the earlier drafts of things, and that seems to be all removed.
When you say positive, what are you talking? What are you referencing? What to you is a positive thing that is not included?
Well, I would just like to make sure that the only thing that I can see that we have Section 8 housing, and beyond that, I'm not even sure how we get any more of that kind of affordable housing. And so I'm not sure how to say it. But that it's to not say it at all when the city has been defined as an ARP age-friendly city, and to not mention anything about seniors seems to be an omission.
So I definitely would like to go back and take a look, make sure that your comments are incorporated.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure, Sarah.
Yeah, there's been lots of versions, so I can double check that. But on page 4 of 10 at the bottom, that one, it says, lastly, in 2008, the city entitled an all affordable for seniors, Belterre, and then we also talk about Chateau Lafayette, which includes the senior.
Right. Well, we have two, but you know, if assuming the population is continuing to age, yeah, that's a continued problem of seniors occupying houses that could be used in other capacities, but we're locked in. So I'm not sure how to verbalize this to make it so that it can be included, but it seems an omission not to say anything.
Okay. I'm trying to think what the follow-up to that is. I mean, making sure that Don's comments are reflected. I mean, I think Sarah, you're following up on that, or?
Yes, I definitely can look at the existing comments. I just want to make sure that there's not anything new or substantive that we want to talk about here at this meeting, so that we can incorporate it.
Right. Okay. Stella, you have your hand up.
I have a question about the edit cycle. So once it goes from GPAC to Planning Commission, will there still be opportunities to update the data if something changes?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. The one thing that is on my mind is the very high fire hazard severity zones, which we have a map and image in the document. We mention it twice. City land area is 46% within those zones. Those zones are being updated by CAL FIRE, and they're, I've been told, imminently going to be presented to the public, but I have no confirmation of dates. But I just really feel that's a really important statistic that we want to get right, especially if there's going to be new data. So I'll keep my ear to the ground, my eyes out, and if I see that information, I will definitely let you all know.
Thank you.
Other questions from committee members? I think I've got two. The first is there's a note in the first bullet point on the first page. There's a note here about the to build all of the very low RENA targets, funding of more than 660 million is needed. I think that might be a response to a question I might have raised. I've done my own little spreadsheet. I think the mayor has as well. That's kind of in my ballpark, but I'm wondering, do we need to substantiate that? Or is there something we've got that's, if someone asks, oh,
yeah,
how'd you come up with that number?
We could definitely. It's substantiated in a fairly recent study of tax credit projects throughout the Bay Area, which are the primary ways that affordable units get funded.
Right.
So we could add a footnote to where that came from, what that report is.
That would be terrific. Thank you. And then the last one is on the very end to get to the conclusion, and I'm trying to think of, like, to me, that's the punchline in all this. What the end with this projecting for further housing needs. I'm wondering, is this what we want to say here in the end? So maybe it's more of an editorial comment or question, I suppose. Again, absent redevelopment and only with the inclusionary zoning, there's really not a whole lot we can do to further affordable housing. And maybe that's the punchline here. Is that kind of where we wanted to leave this in this narrative? I don't know, Diana, I'm just kind of thinking, like, is that what we're distilling down here is our endpoint?
I think that the best thing that this segment can do is raise the issue of, without significant funding, the city was really hamstrung to do pretty much anything.
Right.
Either there has to be more money to directly to like more tax credits or whatever, but those are enormously competitive to the point where high cost areas generally lose on tax credit because they tend to favor lower cost per unit. And you can't get that in Lafayette. You can't get that in much of the Bay Area. So I think that is actually I think that that is really the thrust of this. We'd
Okay.
do more if there was money.
Okay. And I think the county may be approving a low-income housing trust fund, but I agree your situation, which you relate makes sense. I'm thinking in the end here, and I don't think this is a substantive comment, but I think it's worth noting what the city has done with respect to approval of housing. This goes to the mayor's graph, because you go back a decade ago to where we are now, it's actually a fair amount of housing. It's market rate. But I think that that's something we ought to emphasize, that the city has entitled, approved, fostered the development of a fair amount of housing. It's just that absent redevelopment and relying only on the inclusionary zoning program with no real shot at getting tax credits, and there's not a whole lot we can do here, which I guess is the point we're trying to make here. But I think it's worth emphasizing that we've done stuff. It's just that we don't have the resources to do the low affordable housing component that is what people prize. And maybe that's just a stylistic thing. Diana, I don't know if I'd call it a substantive edit. And I do have edits. I don't regard them as substantive, which I'll forward on tomorrow. No. Any other questions from members of the committee before I turn this to public comment? Okay, no hands raised. So Sarah, can we open up the floor for input from the public?
Yes, Lynn McMichael has her hand raised, as does Elliot Hudson. If you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen, or *9 if you're calling in. And then you're in the meeting if you would like to unmute yourself and make your comments. And are you there? There we go.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. This really goes back to what was said earlier by Diane. And I'm sorry I wasn't up to speed in terms of getting the hand recognized. I wondered, I think there would be a lot of people, myself included, who would be so glad to offer our services for the outreach that you have mentioned to renters and the underrepresented community. And I just want to throw that in, that I think there are members of the public here who would like to help with that if there's any way we can assist the committee. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. We may take you up on that offer. Other public comments?
Elliot Hudson is in the meeting.
Hello again. Two things real quickly. First of all, I think that it's important that when the housing element is written, that it avoid inconsistencies between it and the mission statement and vision statements. I think that right now it hasn't really been drafted with that in mind. The second thing that I'd like to address is that the staff report says that they have, after substantial community outreach already, fairly extensive as outlined in the staff report, they have received a number of comments about people's experience in buying homes or living in Lafayette. They want to do more outreach. They have not shared the reports or the stories that they've received, but I know the nature of several of them. I'm concerned about what outreach is going to be conducted further, and I'd like to be sure that it is done in a way that is fair and unbiased and does not target particular interest groups.
Okay. Thank you, Elliot. This may kind of fold into that broader discussion of outreach that we've got teed up here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Other public comments?
Robert Lavoie is in the meeting.
Hello. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk. I had several comments and concerns about the draft report. And there's a lot of assumptions that are baked into this document. I wanted to echo Elliot's comment that that this report should be consistent with the general plan and the mission. I mean, the mission and the vision. I would like to agree with Christine that a lot of the kids or people that are working in the lower income jobs in the city are, part-time kids in high school, or and they're not really, they don't really need housing. I mean, they're already housed here. So I think that needs to be reflected in the report. And there's, even if we don't have an absolute number on that, I think we know that exists, and it's a good size number. Let's see. And just sort of a general question, why is it our responsibility to provide for housing for every person that's interested in living here? It's sort of a big picture question, but something that we need to consider. I had a couple of quick comments on the report, just in terms of the data. On page 3 of 8, it mentions that the by right residential zoning has allowed some displacement of commercial space. It doesn't mention that we're going to suffer the consequence of allowing too much density with buildings 50 feet of height and minimal setbacks, loss of views, and too many cars around, and the potential overcrowding of the city and the schools if we see a whole lot of this happening, which seems like it's the developers are really jumping on this. Also, it says there's approximately 855 seniors that earn less than 80% of the median, and 19% of all seniors are considered very low income, but they don't provide any evidence that this lower income impoverishes them. Most seniors living in single family homes have no mortgage and likely little debt, so their cost of living is much lower than families with kids. Seniors living in apartments are likely living in older buildings, which is the lowest rent available in our town. They haven't been remodeled for years, and it's the cheapest way to live in our city. As soon as they move out, the houses and the apartments will be updated, and they'll move into the higher cost category. The other thing is, for households with 5 or more kids, why would a large family choose to live in an apartment? If those larger apartments do exist, people are likely going to prefer single family housing. And if they don't have sufficient income to buy a house, they're probably going to choose either a lower cost community or rent a home that's an older home that hasn't been updated so that the cost is lower. So I just think that we need a little more research before we put some of these points in the document. I have quite a few more, but I'm going to run out of time. So I'll have to try and submit a letter with some additional comments. But I don't think this letter or this document is ready to submit to the planning department unless they're able to do significant revisions. I realize we're very limited on time, but there's just a lot of problems that I see with this document.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. Other public comments?
Jeremy Levine will be entering the.
Hey, I'm sorry. I raised my hand, but we're on agenda item 7B, correct? I meant to raise my hand for a later one.
That's right. We're on 7B.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry for wasting your time. I'll be back later.
Any other public comments on this item? If you see any other hands raised at this time.
Excuse me, Sarah, is there any way you could send a red line version, like with the changes from the prior the documents? Because I didn't realize that there had been edits to it, and I'd written all over my original copy. If there's a way to do that, that'd be super helpful.
Sure.
Sarah, do you see any other hands raised?
I do not.
So we'll bring this back to the group for discussion. So really, I think that the ask here on staff is to, I guess, approve the document as if it's in substantially final form with no additional substantive changes, acknowledging that there will be editorial changes that various of us have or will offer. I think for me, I've got one question, which is with respect to what we're delivering to planning, because we're sort of on a big production line here. We've got the data document, which we've signed off on, the big thick one. This goes on top, and then I gather, that gets funneled to planning, and if we approve it tonight, in the next few weeks, I would think. Is that the idea here?
Correct. So we would give this to Planning Commission in January, both the data, the background data, the thick document, and this. This is the section 1 of the housing element. So we have to start our review with Planning Commission. So keep in mind, this will go through Planning Commission as well as City Council. Both of those are public processes. So additional modifications and changes can and likely will be made.
Okay. And I see a hand raised by Mayor Kendall.
Yeah, just a comment that was raised that did make sense. Are we supposed to include impacts on infrastructure in this?
No, not in this segment. This is literally just about the needs.
Okay.
If there are impacts on infrastructure, those get talked about in a different chapter, which we've started to draft, called the constraints to the development of housing. So that chapter will address things like water, sewer, et cetera, et cetera.
That's great. Thank you.
Other discussion items from staff? I'm sorry, from the committee? I don't see any other hands raised. I want to go back to timeline here, because I think, Sarah, you mentioned that this, let's say if we approve it tonight, it's going to the Planning Commission in January. Because I'm wondering if it makes sense. I mean, there are edits that people have, different comments raised. I mean, does it make sense to sort of get those in, fold that into the document, and we just hopefully approve it in quick order at the December meeting? I'm mindful of the timeline and the schedule. I don't want to disrupt it, but at the same token, to the extent that there are comments that people have, I want to make sure that they're in. I'll turn this to Sarah, you and Diana, to see if I'm going to blow up your schedule here with a question.
I think part of the problem is that you already going to have a huge amount on your plate in December. That there is so much that has to be done that if we stop and we can do the best we can, let the Planning Commission know if there are significant recommendations that maybe are not showing up in a particular document. And just because the volume of the material that we have to go through is enormous. And, if we're only through, we're not even done with 7B and it's already 7:30, we have more to do. It's going to clog up your calendar. We'll be having to meet every week, which I'm sure you don't want to do because I don't want to.
I would be happy to make this a consent calendar item if that would please the group, so that you would then absolutely 100% be looking at it in advance of the meeting, making one fell swoop motion, not discussing it at the meeting, just a motion.
Okay. It's an interesting idea. I see Chris Lee's hand raised.
I was also feeling the crunch, but I also think that I'm not ready to vote on it tonight. I feel like there were public comments that were worth looking into, and all of us should have one more look through. So the consent calendar idea sounds good, and I wonder if because we are starting to have more work per meeting, should we be switching to more meetings more often, or some way being able to have more frequent time to decide on things.
You're 2 steps ahead of me. on
Merry
that.
Christmas, everyone.
I was going to talk about that in housekeeping.
Okay.
But okay, I got Carol, and then I hope we can wrap this. Carol, please go ahead.
Okay,
Chrissy, you're done.
I think we just need to streamline our process, and that's what we were talking about before.
Right.
We've already commented on this. We should have one time of comment, and it comes back, and we could comment forever. I think we need to streamline the process.
Thank you, Carol. Point well taken. I kind of like the idea of putting this, to the extent that people have comments, they get them into staff by a certain date certain, and maybe Sarah and Diana, I'll look to you to give us that. That's the deadline. And then we'd have on the consent calendar the final version. It sounds like we don't have major substantive issues with this, but I want to have balance the importance of people being comfortable with it, but at the same token, we've got a lot of stuff to chew through here. And to Diana's point, we can't stick on one thing forever. So if I could I don't think we need a motion for that, but I think that maybe Sarah, Diana, if you could tell us like when you'd want comments in on this, you could turn around. I think having a clean version and a red line so people could see what the comments were. We put it on the consent calendar for December, and then we get this out the door to the planning commission with our compliments.
I defer to Sarah on this one. She's the keeper of the calendar.
Sure. So can we have that? So December 7th would be plenty of time.
Is that enough time? Okay. So then for members of the committee, December 7th is the date to get your comments in. I think the understanding is that, again, since I don't think we've heard anything substantive raised here, there are some issues, but the idea of we'll put this on the consent calendar and hopefully we can just approve it and get it out the door. Okay, and so now I am, I get my phone to work. I think we're at or just past the 7:30 mark. And in the past, we've taken a vote to continue. I don't think we need to do that, but we are going to we're likely going to be here after 8 o'clock, I would think. So maybe just get a check. Does that work for people just to get through this?
Yes.
Okay, I'm seeing heads nodding. Okay, so we will now move to item 8A, and I'll turn it to staff for the presentation or discussion.
So again, this one's going to be very similar to the last one. We already talked about it. You saw it once the last meeting. We asked for your comments by a certain time frame, and then this is the final draft that we're hoping to move along to the planning commission. And actually, to be fair, this one won't actually go to the planning commission right away. So each of these sections, we're doing these in groups. So at the end, we'll do a comprehensive review of all the programs. So you will also have that chance before it goes to the planning commission to make any additional edits. So essentially you saw it last time. Any additional edits were included, and this is the current draft. And we'd like to sort of put this first group of programs aside while we focus on the next group.
Okay. So are there any questions on that, or I guess I'd say substantive comments on the goal 10, which is the safety and compliance component of the housing element? I see one hand raised. Carol.
Okay, I just want to be sure. It's this condensed one, right? That updated November 16th. That's the one we're talking about.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the topic or maybe substantive points? I do not see any hands raised.
Wait, sorry.
I see one hand raised. Mayor Kendall.
Yeah, so I was wondering why the maintenance of existing residential zoning, why that was deleted. Just a question.
So that specific program, the intent behind it is already captured in our zoning standards. And sorry, let me just pull that document up. So the zoning ordinance, like all those, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the items included in the objective of that original program were updated in zoning regulations, and so it's no longer needed at this time.
Got it. Okay.
Great. Christine, I see your hand up.
Actually, I had the same question as Mayor Candell. So can you tell me exactly where that is so that I can just look at it? Where you said it is? It's somewhere else. What document is it in now?
So it's within all of the zoning regulations.
Okay.
For the different zoning districts. Sarah, you're muted if you're trying to speak.
Oh.
I know I'm like reading it. So
Okay.
So I think this is the one, maintenance of existing residential something. I think that this might have been the one that was in the instance with sort of the illegally converted residential units in it was an apartment building and they were converted into businesses rather than units and residential units. And so we updated the zoning regulations to, I think it's in general provisions, to say that that's not permitted. And you have a certain deadline by which to revert them back to the residential uses. I'm happy to send you the
So you're saying that those two are together. So you're saying the maintenance of existing residential zoning was in conjunction with conversion of illegally converted residential units. Is that what you're saying?
Sarah, I think they're asking about the program above the conversion of illegally converted. It's maintenance of existing residential zoning.
Are those two together? Is that, I can't, no. I left my book in the other room, so I can't look at it, but.
Is the maintenance one, is that in the, like, is that the program above that has review and revise zoning ordinance? That's now an umbrella that includes the maintenance of is that how I'm reading that? Is that possibly how you're considering this?
Sorry, the review and the revise. Apologies that these aren't numbered. The review and revise one that you're referring to is the one directly above it. No, this
is the big one with all the items in it.
Got it.
It seems like that's more of an umbrella now that encompasses the one that's deleted. Is that true? How to read that?
So that the review and revise the zoning ordinance program was designed to update our zoning code to remove those constraints to development of housing that were identified in the previous housing element. You'll see in the column to the right of that long list that list of items will be updated subject to our new constraints analysis that Diana mentioned earlier.
Okay, so it isn't the umbrella. Okay.
No.
You're just saying it's the updated zoning regulations, get it?
Yeah, and so I believe the first question was about the program on maintenance of existing residential zoning. So the requirement for architectural review of non-residential structures in residential zones is a requirement in our zoning regulations. And so we are proposing to delete it because it's no longer actionable.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I see, Christine, you have your hand up still, and then Stella.
That's because I'm having trouble finding how to get rid of the hand. So, oh, there it is, lower.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Stella?
So with respect to that program, maintenance of existing residential zoning, there's a part of it that says continue to require architectural review of non-residential structures in residential zones to ensure conformity with existing neighborhood character. Is that an action that's going to be taking place under a different program, or review process? Is that specific action defined, in other words, somewhere else?
That is in the zoning. So I think it was sort of, it says continue to require. So it's already in the existing zoning. We're just removing it because it's already there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions on this item 8A from the committee? I don't see any hands raised. So I'll turn to staff to open it up for public comment or input.
Are there any public comments on this item? Please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen, or *9 if you're calling in. I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you. So I'll bring it back for our discussion. So is there like, we're not looking for a motion here, I take it, Sarah? I mean, it's just basically, we kind of nod our heads and say, this component is kind of, we can move this to the done file to be consolidated, added with the others.
We're going to move it to the set aside file, and then we'll review it comprehensively with all of them together, right. And then we'll make a motion.
Yeah, we'll have another whack at this later on, but at least it's kind of good enough here. We can move on to the next item. Okay.
I thought this went to the Planning Commission. It says vote to recommend approval to the Planning Commission.
What I heard is that it will, but it's going to be batched with the other components.
The other groups, yes.
And so we're going to give a present of a nice thick stack of these components to the Housing Commission all in one, as opposed to serially.
I thought I read in the beginning that this was all going to the Planning Commission one at a time, so they would have more time to consider it. No?
So it's we are doing that, but with the sections. So the section is section 1, 2, and 3. Section 1 is the background data, which we just talked about. This is part of section 2, which is the goals, policies, and programs, which we're going to talk about the second part of section 2 on the next item. And then the last section 3 will be the actual land use plan and the opportunity sites. So we will start going to Planning Commission in January with section 1. And then as soon as we get done with section 2, we'll give that to them. And then, so it's going to be phased to Planning Commission, and then it will come all together to City Council.
So the paraphrase, as I understand it, section 1, which is the big thick housing data component, has that narrative discussion on top. There's 2 pieces that make up section 1, and hopefully we'll pass on that second piece of that first section at the next meeting and get it off to planning. And we'll be chewing through part 2 of all part 2 of all this, which is the first piece we just took care of. There's 9 to go, I guess.
Correct.
Okay, so I think we're good there. Sorry, I think we just move on then to item 8B, housing element, program infrastructure, special populations, and sustainability. Is there a presentation you have on this, or just more discussion that you were looking for?
Yes, Renata will give the presentation this evening.
Yeah.
Just one moment. All right, everybody. So just briefly, this will be a short presentation. We're just going to give a little preview of the timeline to give the GPAC kind of the big picture. So a little bit of what Sarah just outlined, but with some dates attached to it to get us focused on moving these pieces forward in that kind of production line somebody mentioned earlier, just so we all have the same dates in our heads, and staff is planning to produce a more detailed timeline of the specific deliverables, when each body will be reviewing them and kind of lay out the responsibilities for DPAC. But that will be forthcoming. This will be kind of a higher level preview. And then we'll do a little bit of a review of the programs included in tonight's packet. So tonight, November 16th, we're looking to close out section 1, which we've discussed will return on consent. And you can see the kind of cycle of how we're trying to move each of these program groups along, and then take these sections to the Planning Commission and then ultimately the City Council. And so we have some of these dates here. Happy to post these slides online and share them out so you can refer to them later. And like I said, we'll be providing a more detailed timeline later. So we are aiming to have the Section 2 goals, policy, and programs done in January, because our ultimate draft housing element will need to go to the Planning Commission in April, so they can review all the sections comprehensively, even though they'll have seen each section independently, to then be able to forward to the City Council in May.
Would you send that to us on the email, please?
Yes, Carol. So I will provide a brief summary of our staff report surrounding the programs, and then we will go through the program topics one by one and do a brief summary of each of those programs, kind of explain briefly why they were included and how they effectuate the goal. And then we'll take questions. You can ask for more information, and then we'll proceed with our process similar to how we handled the first set of programs for safety and regulatory compliance. So as mentioned in the staff report, the state has given direction to cities that their programs should be focused, actionable, and attainable in those 8 years. In reviewing our previous goals, policies, and programs, there were a number of things that were kind of ongoing or supporting housing and weren't discrete tasks with clear deliverables. So in approaching these programs, we want to make sure that they are actionable items. And in doing so, there's kind of been 4 treatments of existing programs that have emerged. The first being that the program should be kept with no revisions. So we saw a lot of that for the last category of the programs that are legally required of us. So for example, that annual housing report, we have to do that every year to show our progress and give the state an update. Others, they needed to be updated, mostly minor. So maybe it was dates or other small verbiage to be more current. And sorry, I'm blocking my screen a little bit. The other was to just completely delete the program. So we touched on that briefly with the one about maintaining existing residential zoning, no longer relevant. That information was captured everywhere or somewhere else. I mean, it's captured somewhere else, or it's an item that we completed. And it no longer needs to be included in the housing element. And this fourth category is something that's kind of emerged out of those programs I spoke to a little bit earlier that were kind of supportive and ongoing, but not discrete actionable things like a program needs to be. And so in those cases, we've identified a few existing programs that we found to be important and might be better suited to be policies. And we'll speak to the policies piece in a little bit, but that's just one way that we thought about looking at this is maybe that's not worth getting rid of them altogether, but instead changing them to a different use and purpose. And again, just a reminder, so we are reviewing this group of programs, but future comments may, as we continue through the process on programs that we reviewed previously, can be brought back once we close out this whole program development cycle. So while we do want to keep things moving, it's not to say that the next meeting will be your last chance to comment on any of these. Just want to put that out there again. So there were questions about the policies and kind of how they fit into this process. And we got the suggestion to maybe try including some of the existing policies alongside these draft programs to kind of show that relationship of how it all fits together. So at this point, we are not discussing policies. It's really more for demonstration purposes. Just because these policies were included alongside these draft programs, doesn't mean that we're recommending them to stay as they are. It's really just to kind of illustrate that relationship. So we are still intending to review or visit the policies once we have a full set of programs, so we can more accurately capture the essence of each of these programs into a guiding policy within those goals. And so that will be next year once our production line has put through its units, its widgets. And another reminder is the previous category and these 3 categories may seem somewhat light. So it's not a huge number of programs that we're reviewing and discussing at this time, but we do just really want to caution that we have some more hefty subjects to cover, and want to make sure, again, that all of the things that are making it into that final housing element as programs can be achieved in that 8-year timeline planning period. So of course, we want to do a lot of things to meet the housing needs of Lafayette residents, but we need to make sure we're showing that progress year over year to the state and being able to do what we say we're going to do. So just another recap of what's to come. So during this meeting, again, we're going to talk through some of these programs, and feel free to ask questions, clarifying any other information that you think would be helpful in guiding this conversation. And then ahead of next month's meeting, all the GPAC members will kind of look through these through that evaluation criteria list. You'll solicit, as appropriate, commission feedback or your constituency feedback, which hopefully will have some more, maybe like a checklist soon. And we, similar to the executive summary comments, will need comments back on this set of programs by Tuesday, December 7th. So we'll just set that as the deadline for everything, so we can bring that back for the December 14th meeting. And I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and pull up those.
Thank you, Renata. So I think what we're looking for are higher level comments here. Big picture, the idea being that if we've got wording suggestions, they need to be in the hopper by December 7th, which is our deadline date. There's really big picture topics that we're looking for here. And I will note, and I have to thank staff for this, where to the extent that there's an existing policy, it's there, you could see the program underneath it. I think that's helpful. To the extent that maybe it's a newer program, there's no policy yet, that the indication there is to be drafted by staff at a future date. Not that we're punting on it, but we're basically kind of want to get our hands around the programs, and then we can kind of work back to make sure we have policies that fit. So it's a bit of a bottom up. Is the way I'd look at that. So maybe I'll just turn it back to the group again. Big picture, higher level questions on what's in front of us here with the infrastructure, special populations, and sustainability components of the housing element. So I see a hand, Matt Peace. And Matt, you're muted. Okay.
There we go. Sorry, apologize. These are mostly questions, and if staff just wants to get back to me later, that's great. If you can answer them quickly, that's fine. On infrastructure, you talk about the capital improvement program, and on the new objective, it wasn't clear to me, does this cover both residential, does the capital improvement cover infrastructure for both residential and downtown commercial and mixed use area, because the two overlap, and I suspect the infrastructure could be used by both. So that was my question.
So
Matt, sorry, I was just gonna say, sorry, Matt, can you please say that again? I momentarily lost your train of thought.
It's not much of a train, so no problem. My question was on the infrastructure page under the capital improvement program, under the revised new objective. You talk about, evaluating the infrastructure for residential development. And my question is, does that cover the downtown commercial or mixed use areas, since infrastructure really supports both? How is staff considering that?
yeah, so I think it is, I mean, this is the housing element, so it needs to be specific to residential, but I think you're right, there are some downtown overlap, right, where there's mixed use.
So will it cover commercial?
Yes, I believe it will.
Okay, thank you. The second question, can I ask a second question, or do you want me to defer, Jim?
I think you're on a roll. I just go for it and we'll just move
Okay.
through committee members.
On the bottom of that same page, you talked about the housing rehabilitation in non-residential areas to be considered for policy. So is that going to be a policy? No, it's not a program, it's a policy.
Correct.
Okay. Will there be any discussion in there about reduce the amount of reduction of commercial sites? Because it's one of the issues that we're concerned about at the chamber, is this reduction in commercial sites that we've seen over the last year or so.
So currently the wording says rehab, so I would imagine that's existing multifamily within the commercial area, but we can be a little bit more explicit if you'd like.
Okay, so that's referring to existing residential that's in a commercial area.
Correct.
Okay, well, if that's true, then I'm fine with that. Thank you for that clarification. Next page on sustainability. You talk about the electrification for new construction. I've read quite a bit about this, and it's a little more complex than I ever thought it was. On the surface, it seems like a no-brainer, but electricity in California actually costs more than natural gas per unit of energy. We don't always have the best reliable electric network here in California. And so I guess my question is, does staff have some information they could send to us that educates us more about that?
Yes, we can do that. Essentially, I believe that this program is essentially supporting an existing program that the county is already doing. So essentially that would be like the city submitting a letter saying we support your passing of these regulations kind of thing. Okay. And so you're just seeking information about whether or not that's a good idea?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Quick question, why are you deleting the environmental action plan and the green building incentives?
I have the same question.
So I believe the environmental action plan was completed. So that's something that we did do. And then green building incentives, it seems like it's actually something that happens sort of yearly and is not something specifically actionable as it relates to housing. So we do still want to keep it as part of kind of the things that we do that support housing, but it's not, we want to kind of parse down our action list or program list to say, so that we can show HCD, yes, we are accomplishing these things, right? So we're saying, we said we're going to do this. And when we do the annual report, we want to say, here's the progress we've made on this. So it's kind of going into, it's more like an ongoing aspect rather than a completion item, if you will.
Okay, could you then clarify in the future then that it's ongoing and that it's not being deleted?
Sure, I think it's listed in the time frame section of the chart. maybe?
It is under the section
Yeah,
to
it
be
says,
deleted
that was
because
where I got confused, is it says ongoing, which I would think it would be,
I
but
see.
you've got it under the heading to be deleted.
Got it.
So if we could clarify that, that would be terrific. Last page, and then I'll shut up, is on special needs, special population, excuse me. You talk about a policy of resource housing for special population, the importance of that. Part of that population is helping them with jobs. For example, some of our grocery stores are very good at hiring people in this category. Is jobs part of this, or is it just housing?
It's just housing.
Diana, I think you understand the importance of, for this population, having jobs that are local.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
So is it the state says don't talk about jobs, or is that our decision?
It can be our decision, I guess. I think that the thrust, though, is the state wants to know, and we have actual specific laws in place that require us to talk about housing for special needs populations, and that's what this document is for.
Okay. It's an opinion. I think we ought to think about jobs, and the chamber would love to help with that, of working with employers that might help with the jobs to give these populations the money to pay for the housing. To me, the two are so intricately connected, but that's an opinion, not a question.
Matt, I just want to mention that maybe that's something we can add to sort of the ongoing thing that's not like
great.
actionable to HCD, but that we
Okay.
want to support that.
Terrific. And then that's it. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, I'm sorry. Why are we deleting the senior housing and family definition?
so in the recommendation column, you can see that those were both completed.
Huh. Okay. Okay.
Or the family definition will be updated.
Okay. Thank you. I'm done.
Great. I've got Carol, Mayor Kendall, and then Don Jenkins.
Okay, I'd like to go back to number 1. Guess we start over here. I agree with Matt, but I just wanted to get a clarification of what was said. The old one said to maintain the community's older residential neighborhoods, and the new one says to support existing and new residential development, and it doesn't say commercial. Now, were you going to put that in and change the policy? Is that what I understood? Or the policy remains the same? And
So as we mentioned, we're not discussing the policies right now. That was just for illustrative purposes. So we will be revisiting policies down the road. And as we've mentioned, that these programs need to be focused on housing for this element. But there are 6 other elements where we can talk through land use and growth management and those kind of broader land uses. We do understand that they are interrelated, but that is what the general plan is trying to capture, right? It's trying to show that comprehensive view of how it all fits together.
all right, thank you. All right, then under downtown strategy, the revised says update downtown specific plan for consistency with phase 2 of objective standards. I know they're going to redo objective standards. Is that what phase 2 is? Is that what you're referring to by phase 2?
I think the second phase of objective standards was meant to be for downtown. Work on that has not been done. So there's another set of objective standards as it relates to SB 9, which is single family, but the phase 2 that's referenced here is for downtown objective standards.
Okay, thank you. All right. Then next page, under the electrification. What are the reach goals? The Board of Supervisors support efforts of the Board of Supervisors to institute reach goals. I know it says
So the California Building Code, the California Building and Residential Code lay out the standards for building performance, and jurisdictions can have more ambitious, like energy efficiency goals, and those are called reach goals. And so more efficient buildings with, that are electrified is an example of a reach goal.
Okay, so that could be capitalized. In other words, it looked like in parentheses, it looked like it was sort of a slang term for something. But they are codified.
The
goals.
reach goals is not in the code, I don't believe, but again, we're talking about the concepts of the programs, right? And we can make that more clear in future wording of that objective.
Okay. All right. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Mayor Kendall.
Yeah, thank you. Very, very cool. So on the first page, and maybe I just don't understand the format, is under the new mixed use developments, and it's on all the other columns, it would have the existing and then the new next to it. But this one, so I'm assuming all the ones that are maybe considered, those are just the new, because it doesn't have an existing one. Is that how I'm reading that? So maybe put all those ones over under revised new, rather than putting them in the first column, because that makes it look like it's an existing one, but it's not an existing one, right?
It is.
Those are existing ones. You can see in the existing or new column that those were.
But the one that says to be considered for conversion into policies.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So those are programs that are existing that we're recommending be changed into policies, because they're more ongoing. They're not actionable items that are directly related to what the city can do.
Okay, so great. So should that all, like, are you saying that we have the existing one? Is the new one under the program going to be the same?
We will, if the committee decides to change those into policies, we'll discuss them alongside all of the policies once the programs are done. Sorry.
Thank you. No, that's cool. So then, so under the environmental stuff, are we going to work on water or recycled water? Or do we put in fire protections as part of our infrastructure? Or where do those go if they're not here?
So we did discuss kind of gray water and exploring that for residential and maybe even commercial. But we felt that because it could apply to commercial uses or other like recreational facilities, it might be more appropriate under the conservation element. Because we do have those other ones, and same with for like fire things, we have a safety element where those kinds of matters can be considered. And there's like residential code standards for wildfire, what's it called, or fire resistive materials and those kinds of things.
Okay,
exist.
So then under the policy for the disabled, I would include a meeting with Sunflower Hill. You've got all these people, you've got Brilliant Corners, Las Trampas. I would meet with Sunflower Hill as well. They've been they're now in our community. And I have a question, and I have the last one. What is your definition of an emergency shelter?
It's a state and federal definition that says it's a location where people who are homeless can show up when they're on the street. We are required to plan for and zone for emergency shelters, but emergency shelters are no longer considered the first line of support. It's the model now is housing first, but unfortunately state law hasn't caught up with federal law. And so we are still required to have language in there about emergency shelters.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Great.
That's
Okay.
it.
Thank you, Mark Kendall. I've got Don Jenkins.
My only question is in regards to the goal 7. Down at the bottom, you have removed the idea of senior housing as it relates to La Miranda Village. And I am wondering, is there a reason in the event that the Lafayette Senior Service Commission and La Miranda Village were to become more closely allied, to have this in effect, say, taking it all the way out, is that not detrimental to any change of activity? I realize they're two separate entities right now, but at some point they might become closer allied.
So if we can go back
Remove
to
it.
that, to the presentation a little bit earlier, we want to make sure that our programs are action items, right? And so you can see in the existing objective of that senior housing one on the bottom of the page, the city was going to support that virtual senior village, which was the website that was created. And so we finished that program already. And at the top of the page, we're proposing a new one instead. And so we're totally open to your feedback. And that's why we're asking for these commissions to give feedback on these programs to understand what might work best to address these specific needs. So it's not that we're saying get rid of the La Miranda Village at all. It's just saying that the city did support the establishment of that virtual senior village. And so we don't need to carry that forward because it's been created.
Since it already has been created.
Exactly.
So okay. So
yeah, but we did create a new program regarding senior housing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Don. And got Carol Singer, you've got your hand up.
Well, Don's comment, shouldn't we continue to support the La Miranda Village? No, that's not necessary.
So,
okay.
No, please.
I was gonna say that the action item was to help develop the website, and the website was developed. So that's why we want to remove it. And then we want to keep all of our programs to be actionable items so that we can say, this is what we did. We can, like a grocery list, right? I got this item, so that the HCD can see that we're making progress towards our goals.
Right.
And so if it's an ongoing thing, we want to put it in a policy or somewhere else in the document, but not a specific program. Does that make sense?
I understand.
And not exactly. I would think it would be something we're continuing to do.
So Carol, if you see the new senior housing program at the top of that page under goal 7, we're intending to work with the Senior Services Commission to develop an outreach program. And so that might involve, depending on how what the result of those conversations is some involvement in that La Miranda Village. But we're trying to work with the existing entity that is the experts in that area to understand more specifically what would be helpful.
I do, except it says the Senior Services Commission, doesn't mention the village, working with the village.
So yeah, if that's a partner of the commission, we're happy to work with them too.
Okay.
I'll handle the La Miranda Village. I understand that.
That might be a good edit in written form. Any other questions from committee members before we go to public comment? I think I've got 2. The first, on the first page, the Downtown Strategy and Specific Plan. So the Downtown Specific Plan was done in 2012 or completed. I think I understand it took years to get there to do it. So with this, are we in effect launching a new downtown specific plan? Is that kind of the intent here?
That's not the intent.
Okay,
It's to update it.
updated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to make sure that everything's consistent.
All elements of the general plan and all specific plans have to be aligned, have to be internally consistent. So that's what's being required.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And then the second one, actually, I think Matt touched on this earlier. This is that on the second page, electrification for new construction. That's a huge topic. You know, I've got solar, got electric car, but this is a huge policy statement. If it is to say we're going to discontinue gas in new homes, so if that's the thrust of it, and if we're going to say we support that, if that's kind of what the intent is, I kind of think that we need to understand it a whole lot better because it's a big topic area with lots of implications. So, you know, it's one thing to sign this, yeah, we support what the county's doing, but it kind of like, it'd be really important to understand what exactly is this something we kind of want to get behind, and maybe we do, but I just want to flag it that this is a big, huge policy area and we want to tread appropriately. Don't know what more to say on that. So if there's no other comments from this committee, I see Carol, and then we're going to go to public comment.
I'm sorry, I do have some other thing, but let's go on forever. But
Yeah.
what you're saying, Jim, it says new residential developments. I didn't know whether that meant developments, a lot of houses. Or does it mean just a house in a neighborhood? And my second question about it was, I've had in my neighborhood several homes torn down to the ground and a new house built. So do those have to be electrified?
Don't know. It's all wide open here. In the end, I think it's the council. I see the mayor smiling here. It's going to do this one. But I'm just saying it's a big policy area. And so we could stick it in here, say we support it, but it'd be good to understand really what are we saying we're supporting here. That's my point.
Yeah, and I don't know what I'm supporting with it.
Yeah, likewise. Okay, I think with that, we're kind of gone through our questions. So I'll open the floor for public comment input on this topic 8B.
If you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. Press star 9 if you're calling in. Jeremy Levine has his hand raised and is joining me.
This is the one I was waiting for. Good to see you all, as always. I sent in 3 public comments this week. I hope that you all read them. I meant them. But I actually today wrote a 4th public comment. I just couldn't help myself about this agenda item, and it didn't seem to go through. So I just want to lay out some of the cases for you. For goal 7, it starts by saying approximately, the goal is to promote access to affordable housing opportunities. But none of the programs or policies are actually about encouraging affordable housing production. There's one that's about requiring some units be set aside for people with special needs, but nothing about very low to moderate income households, which is in the goal number 7. So I am hoping that the GPAC will take some time before voting on this. It sounds like that's already the plan, and consider what policies and programs we can add that will try to encourage affordable housing production so that we can really promote access to affordable housing opportunities. There are 3 ways, as far as I can tell, to encourage affordable housing: density, subsidies, incentives. I've made the case before several times. We have an inclusionary housing ordinance. 15% means that we get more units. Then the more that we build, market rate. Density leads to more affordable housing. Subsidies are very expensive, but our town is resourceful. We are well off. And if we want to find the revenue to subsidize housing, we can do it. State grants, local taxes, other revenue streams, we can find them if it's a priority. And then incentives like streamlining housing that meets certain affordability requirements, or providing, a higher floor area ratio or more density overall in exchange for more affordable units. That's the third way to get affordable housing. And I mean, we have in the goal that we're trying to promote access to affordable housing, which I think should involve actually trying to encourage the development. So I appreciate the GPAC's hard work, and I hope that you will think about how we can proactively encourage affordable housing development to meet the needs of our special needs populations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Additional comments?
Robert Lavoie will come in now.
Hello. I'd like to comment on two items, specifically the electrification for new construction. I think that's a example of a misguided policy that is put in there by politicians for a goal like to reduce global warming or something, but it's not really sustainable by if you know people that understand the power grid. The electric grid is becoming more unstable and forcing homeowners to have exclusively electric power limits their freedom and their options for choosing their own power sources for heating and so forth. And gas is a much cheaper heating source than electricity. My father-in-law models the power for Montana Power for the last 40 years. So I spent a lot of time talking about power grids and electricity. So, but I don't have time to go into all that. But anyway, I would encourage you guys not to try and codify something like this without really knowing what's going on. So, regarding the comments, Jeremy's comment just now about increasing density and subsidy and incentives. I think that there's very little evidence that increasing density and it sounded like the incentives were also increasing density by increasing the floor ratios and so forth. I think in an expensive area, there's very little proof that you can build affordable housing no matter what, if it's new. I agree that subsidies are the only option, and whether that's from the state or from charity, if we're going to have affordable housing, that's where it's going to come from. And so people need to come up with some nonprofit organizations to raise money for and fund it. But that still creates a lot of problems because you can't build very much of it. And so who gets lucky and gets the cheap house? So anyway, but it is an issue, and we need to document that the solution is funding, and we've got an unfunded mandate from the state. So thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Any other comments?
So I do see another hand raised, although it's Jeremy and he's already had his time to comment. So I don't see any additional hand raised.
Okay. All right. So I'll bring it back to the group. My understanding here is that really, to the extent we've got detailed comments, we need to get them to staff by December 7th. We will talk about this again at our next meeting in December. And assuming we can get to closure on it, it goes into the batch file that we'll re-examine when we get all these elements done. That's my understanding of the process here. Okay, I see one hand raised, two hands raised. Okay, so I've got Carol and then I got Mike Kim. Cal, you're muted.
I'd like to ask Diana, is the electrification something that we need to have in there? Is it state something?
No, not specifically, although we are required to include information about ways to what's the word? Opportunities to God, I'm drawing a blank. Opportunities to for energy conservation. Sorry. So that is one way to do energy conservation. We do have to include a section on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, I want to echo what Robert Lavoie said. From my experience developing, the whole electrification effort is fraught with lots of problematic aspects of it. So I definitely think he made some very good comments, and I also want to echo his comments regarding the means of affordability. And I think wherever he gets his information is pretty sound, because the real world, that it just it's not that easy, right? You can't subsidize your way through affordable housing, as it turns out.
Yeah.
Anything else, Mike, or you're set?
No, I just wanted to echo his comments. I think they were very smart and real world comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments from the group? I see no other hands raised. So then I will encourage folks to go through this thoroughly, get comments to staff by December 7th. We'll see this again at our next meeting, and hopefully we can kind of go through it again and then stamp interim done and move it on. So great. That means that we are on to item 8C, mission statement update. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Pease.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Several weeks ago, we had a special GPAC meeting that allowed us to do a deep dive on the draft of the vision and mission statement, and also to get public comment. And what we wanted to accomplish tonight is to share with you some work that the subcommittee has done based on that meeting and based on additional feedback that we've received over the last couple of weeks since the October 21st meeting. And we came up with another draft. And our hope tonight is that we can share that draft with you, give you a chance to ask us anybody on the subcommittee, any questions you've got of why we did what we did. If you've got feedback that is strategic in nature, that makes substantial changes, certainly we'd like to hear that. If there are smaller edits that you'd like to make, you can certainly give that to us in email. And the idea is to get some additional feedback over the next couple of weeks, including some additional feedback that we hope to get from the Acalanes High School team that Namratha has been working with. They have seen this revised November 21st draft, and come back to you in our December meeting with our final suggestion. And at that point, our plan is to ask for a vote of either supporting it or not supporting it, or suggesting something else. And then we will hand off to City Council in January. Our original plan was to do this in December, or to hand off in December, but we believe that with SB 9, that the City Council's agenda is quite full, and we probably would not get the due attention that I know they would just love to give to this. So I'm being somewhat facetious on all of this. They'd rather deal with this than SB 9, I suspect. Anyway, Sarah, if I could ask you or Renata to please put up the slide that shows the previous mission statement and the new one. And what I'll do is I'm assuming that you've all seen this and you've read it. what I'll try to explain is kind of the logic from the subcommittee of what went into this. So on the left is the draft statement that we discussed thoroughly on October 21st, and then the revision is on the right. So just to kind of walk you through some of the changes that we made and why we made them, is we combined together the vision and mission statement. And the reason we did that was we frequently got feedback throughout this process that people felt we were contradicting something that was in the vision but not in the mission, or they didn't balance. And people would try to reconcile the two. And that was never our intent. They're really two different things. One is the vision of where we hope to end someday, and then the mission is how we get there. So we thought by putting them together, we could actually tighten it up a bit and also make sure that we didn't have this confusion about trying to balance words and language in there. We also added back in a comment about the schools, and we discussed several different adjectives and went with excellent schools. And we also added a comment about making this highly desirable small town community. This is something that came through very, very strongly. So that was one of the big changes that we made. The second change is, if you look down the right-hand side, is we moved from guiding principles to guiding characteristics. We had what we thought was a surprising conversation that, because we've used principles in some other documents, that this might contradict it. We did go back and do some checking. I don't believe it contradicts it, but we felt we were better off with characteristics. That seemed to be an more acceptable phrase and would eliminate concerns about conflict. Under the guiding characteristics, if you go down to the fourth bullet point and the fifth bullet point, you'll see that we broke those out. We still have the concept of this vibrant downtown core. But then we also expanded out this idea of recognizing that Lafayette has become a more complex and a more varied and a more diverse, and I'm talking about from a physical standpoint, diverse city that starts to defy any single description. And so we talked about this idea, particularly in the residential areas, that there is this range, and it's a quite wide range, of from rural to something that's far from rural. We came up with this idea of the mixed use multifamily neighborhoods. This would be more towards the downtown core, which is probably what most of us think of in that area. And the idea is that there are points in between, but each neighborhood has some very distinctive characteristics. Jim's neighborhood probably is one of the closest that would fit a rural area. I live on the trails. It is very suburban, without question. Susie lives in an area that is more densely packed, has more of the multifamily development, and in some cases, in certain parts of commercial, it is a mixed use of both commercial and residential and higher density. So the idea is that there is this spectrum, and trying to get away from any one definition, because no one definition seems to fit that very well. We did have some suggestions that we needed to change one of our words, and we changed from boards to commissions to be correct. Sarah helped us with that one. We added the word ridgeline, both in the characteristics and the vision and mission statement. We were all educated that there is a difference between a hill and a ridgeline, and so I understand that now. And so we've put that in this. But in essence, we've continued to try to use this broad language that we can use for many, many years and give our policymakers, our voters, our committees and commissions the latitude as things change, desires change, to make those changes in the city without hamstringing them unduly but still be able to describe the characteristics of the city. So we've tried to get this balance. And then the final one is, and Stella helped us with this quite a bit, is the idea of supporting environmental sustainability and effective infrastructure. The earlier draft, really, I talked about it many times about this tension between the two, and I think there is some tension, but we were educated that you know, this is something we actually can achieve to be both sustainable and still have sufficient infrastructure. It's not a trade-off as much as a mutual goal that we can get to. So we changed that wording, which I think is much more aspirational and much more positive than what we had before. So I'm going to pause at that point and turn to my two fellow peers on the subcommittee to see if I missed anything or anything you two would like to add.
Thank you, Matt. I think I'll defer to Namratha to see if she has any comments.
I'm good. I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. I think I make one note. It might be clear on the guiding characteristics. You'll note that the second one in the prior draft in October, we dropped. And that was from feedback from the last session we had. There are a couple of folks who kind of felt that just didn't quite fit in, so we took it out. I think we're getting closer here. We've got some terrific input from different folks. This may not 100% please everyone, but you know, we're trying to sort of like pull together something that sort of resonates. And I will say, it's funny, I was thinking of another city, it might be analogous to us, Danville, with a vibrant downtown core, residential neighborhoods. I looked at their mission statement. I don't know, to me, this seems to be a lot more, really, it speaks to Lafayette in a way some of the other mission statements I've seen really could be totally generic. This really, to me, really speaks to the community we have here. And that was the goal. And hopefully in the end, we get to that point with this. So
Just
back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. You know, as we open it up for questions, both from the GPAC as well as from the general public, like I said, we'd like to clarify, you know, questions you might have, and then major issues that you think we should be considering over the next couple of weeks. If there's some minor tweaking that you'd like to talk about, I'd like to defer that either in email or certainly you can reach out to any of us on the subcommittee. But I just want to make sure we use our time in a valuable way here. So that's it from the presentation. Sarah, why don't you keep that up if you could, please? I think that helps people. Thank you.
So I'm going to open it up for questions, comments from GPAC. I see Carol, you've raised your hand.
Yes, you know, Park and Rec just had a chance to look at this. So we have provided comments, and we wanted to have another guiding characteristic. So how does that get incorporated? Does the group discuss whether they think that's a good thing or not, or
the process
what
that
happens?
what we've generally followed, Carol, is the subcommittee has met regularly. We have a facilitator, that Jamie, that helps us, right. And we read all of this stuff and we try to make decisions as best we can to incorporate those things that we think still meet particular goals. You know, one of the things we're trying to do is keep this tight and simple. It was one of our guiding principles. I didn't put that slide up today. So there is a challenge as the groups give us suggestions, is this document can expand dramatically if we're not prudent in how we do it. But that's the process we go through to answer your question, Carol.
All right, so we just send it to the subcommittee. Because
yes, we do post it to the general alias also as we get them, so everybody sees this.
Yeah, because Parks was one of the you know, on the survey, one of the most wanted things, and there's nothing.
No, Carol, it is there.
Ridgeline Parks.
It's in the vision statement. We talk about parks.
Yeah, but you also talk about ridge lines and that's down below, and open
Right.
spaces is down below. So we
But we
wanted
do
one
talk about
about
parks.
pursuing the development of parks and recreation facilities.
So,
We'll send it to the committee.
Okay.
yeah, and I took notes from the park commission session I went to. Carol, I sent it to you. I think you may have sent something back to me. Again, we just want to make sure we capture the comments, and then we'll sort of go through all this as a subcommittee.
Okay.
And that's the plan. So I've got Stella Witherspoon and then Don Jenkins with hands raised.
Yeah, thank you all. This is really, I think, coming along. I can see kind of the focus is starting to become much more crisp, and I agree with you, Jim, that this is starting to describe Lafayette as we know it. But I wanted to ask about the comments from the Transcirc that I sent. The recommendation was to add a guiding principle. I understand that you're trying to kind of keep it restrained, but the commission's feeling was that there needed to be something more explicit about transportation, that effective infrastructure was not sufficient, and that the simple characteristic that was proposed was improve safe mobility for all modes of travel. So I wanted to understand the subcommittee's thinking and response to that recommendation.
We did see that, Stella. I guess our initial reaction was it started to get into a level of detail that we thought was best set by, your commission and others from a policy standpoint. So it was just a matter of trying to keep it as high level and as tight as possible, and deferring to your commission in terms of how that plays out in the larger infrastructure scenario.
I understand. Well, thank you for explaining that. I guess I also wanted to bring it up here because I know this will ultimately go to the council for their deliberation. And so I wanted the mayor and the vice mayor, who I think on the call, to just understand and know what Transcirc had suggested and put forward, and that they can use that information at the time that they're reviewing this.
Thank you, Stella.
Thank
any other
you.
comments, or you're set? Okay, I see Don Jenkins, and then I've got Carol
Yeah.
Singer.
My comment is simply, first of all, I want to congratulate your group for finessing all the arguments about semi-rural. I think you have handled this superbly. This is wonderful. The other thing that I would only suggest, or again, my saw is older people, and the idea in the very first line there, it's a safe, friendly or family friendly. To add, it's a safe, all age, family friendly city for residents. So to have something that would indicate not just family or just younger, I consider family as younger, and I want to include the older individuals in the community. I'll write a note to that effect. There in the very top line, it's a safe, family friendly, just a safe age family or all age family friendly.
Okay. Yeah, if you could write a note, that'd be really helpful.
Does a welcoming community for people of all ages, I feel like that also goes into age-friendly community.
Yeah, that's close. Yeah.
Because that's kind of the first sentence, and I feel like putting it in its own sentence does like emphasize its importance. Putting it with all the others
I see what you're saying.
equally good, but
I see what you're saying, Samantha, and all ages kind of covers it. Yeah.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Okay. So Don, you're set. Any other? I can't see any other hands raised from the committee.
Well, I'll raise.
Okay, I now see Carol Singer and then Namratha Kaslanati. So Carol?
I've seen a lot of comments on the word nearby hills. in our public comments, and Park and Rec had one too, that, you know, we have a lot of hills in our city. They're not just nearby. I don't know. I'll just raise that.
Carol, is there, I saw those comments, and we have, as a subcommittee, we haven't had a chance to talk about them yet. But is there another word that you think goes in there, or are you just saying don't put hills, don't put nearby in there?
Yeah, I think what I've seen is just don't put nearby. We have with, it says with excellent schools. It's a with hills, ridge lines. Doesn't say surrounded by ridge lines. Just lists there parks and creeks.
I agree with that. I was going to make a comment on that too, actually. A lot of the residents in my area live on hills. So I would like to say hills and valleys, actually. That came from another letter too that was submitted.
Okay, thank you.
We're all for cutting text. Namratha, I see you, and then I have Anna Radonich.
I know I'm in the subcommittee, but I just was, I've kind of been staring at this statement a couple of times. And that second sentence starts with, it is a safe. And I'm thinking, do we want to refer to our city as it, or more of like, we are a safe, family-friendly city? Yeah. And that's just something to think about. It's a little bit of a wordy word issue, but just like an idea to think about.
Yeah, it's a good
one, Namratha.
Thank you. Anna?
Thanks. I will say, I think you guys have done an excellent job taking in comment. It's really clear here that you've added in words like creek and different words that we've heard throughout the public comment process. So I think you guys have done great. Just to tie it back to Stella's comment and her committee's suggestion for another guiding characteristic, I do understand and I do agree that, you know, we can't include all, you know, suggestions because it could get to be 20 pages long. But maybe just something to consider is support environmental sustainability and effective, safe infrastructure. And in my mind, that can also tie back to our previous agenda item, which was, you know, regarding the electrification for new construction. Because what I kept going back to during that discussion of the previous item is wildfire. If you're going to have more electrification, you need to have, you know, safe, reliable, and effective infrastructure surrounding power. So I know, Stella, I would imagine yours was more towards safe streets specifically as a type of infrastructure, but there's all sorts of infrastructure. So it may be a way to tie into Stella's comment and also kind of be a little more robust to tie back into our programs and policies a little bit. So thank you.
That's a great suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Christine?
So I had another thought because of the conversation we had earlier today. And I think Don Eames had called in about it. But Lafayette engages residents, community groups, and business and property owners. Could we add that and property in there? Or did you guys take that out? I think, no. Could you put that in there? Because I think that would help with either people that, you know, rather than just residents, it's also people who own property here, right? So the rental house across the street, for example, and also Dawn Eames she owns a business property, but she doesn't actually run the business. And then the other thing is on the guiding characteristics of our community. I've seen this before in some letters and some comments from people in my neighborhoods about the maintain fiscally responsible. Were we gonna think about the low service city, or is that changing? Or is that part of the maintain a fiscally responsible? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, we did talk about that one, Christine, and we consciously left that, and I think there was an very early 60s or 70s about low taxes or something, or something like that. We think that that's up to the voters, and I guess the city council also, in terms of letting them determine what they want to do. So it got into the policy issue.
Okay.
And if I could add, couple of things, one of which is the way that taxes were done back in the late 60s when we incorporated, and it is done now after Prop 13, is very different. So the revenue structure's changed, and the concept, that's point number one. Point number two is the limited services element in that survey we did came in last. So there's a policy debate there, and I'm sure we'll hear about that from different folks. But we figured in as much as that's kind of where it showed up in the survey, that we viewed as a council call. If they view that as something that should be maintained, then council can opt to put that in there. The concept of a fiscally responsible is sort of a thread with prior mission statements. It was sort of called fiscally conservative, but I spent my career in public finance. I'm not sure what you could call fiscally conservative. So responsible is sort of, we thought was a good way to frame that and be consistent with what we had in the past.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Christine. Carol, got you again.
Oh, well, just following Stella's lead, I'd like to read for the record the guiding characteristics from the Parks, Trails, and Recreation Commission, which is support or promote the development of new facilities and improve existing parks and recreation facilities to support the demands of current and future residents. Probably promote, so you don't have to support. I'd just like to read it in the record.
Thank you, duly noted. And I did comment for the folks in PTR that you were going to be a strong advocate for them, and you are. So let's see, Christine, do you have your hand up again?
No, I just didn't see the lower, so I'll lower it. And but I will say, you guys, I thought you did a good job in bringing in lots of different ideas here. So I was very happy with the changes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm looking, at least on my screen, I don't think I see any more hands raised, so I can't see everyone. So if your hand's raised and I can't see you, please just speak up. Otherwise, we'll go to public comment. Hearing no voices. So I'll open this for public comment and input.
I think I'm gonna shall I stop sharing for the moment? Or you want me to keep it up? I'm happy.
I think it's helpful having this up here.
Yeah, I agree.
So Elliot Hudson should be in the meeting.
Okay.
Hello. The addition of small town to the current draft is a tremendous improvement. In my view, you're now close, but not yet there. Under state law, the general plan is a planning document about the values and aspirations of Lafayette residents for the physical character of their town. They have told you in response to your surveys that they want Lafayette to retain its semi-rural aspects. The Roundup, American Kitchen, Cooperage, the Hen House, the Public House, Rancho Cantina, even Diamond K, open spaces bordering homes, wide paths, beautiful hills within and all around. These and other things, and others are things that make Lafayette describe itself as semi-rural in the past and that we still love today. And guess what? Many of them still exist. Danville has maintained its character despite enormous growth. Lafayette wants to maintain its character, but we are losing it, and your residents have told you that. The character that we love is a direct and undeniable result of the protection of Lafayette's semi-rural values over the past decades when the general plan made semi-rural a central priority. The picture you showed in October is the better Lafayette. It's not Broadway Plaza, it's trees, wide open skies, low buildings fronting Mount Diablo. That picture was chosen for a reason. It's the Lafayette most of us cherish. Even that picture can be fairly called semi-rural. Semi-rural is definitionally correct. Semi means partial or somewhat. We are partially and somewhat rural. So what if some people differ on that, exactly what it means? The same is true of vibrant. Some people think vibrant means Las Vegas. Others think we already have a vibrant downtown. What is important is that Lafayette residents have told you in greater numbers than any other concept that we want our development to maintain open spaces, small town, and we want to describe ourselves as semi-rural. Read the over 200 heartfelt comments in the spreadsheet I sent you. We want to hang on to that ideal. If we have to add housing, we want it to look and feel as much possible like Lafayette's historic character. If we revitalize, we want the same. Who is this GPAC to substitute your personal views? There has to be integrity to this process. There has not been enough integrity in too many of the city's past planning processes. I'll give you one example. If the city had acted as residents demanded since 2002 and repeatedly thereafter to rezone the Deer Hill property, there would have been no Measure L about 44 luxury townhomes. And we have not fought for 10 years over 315 apartments that if were built will utterly obliterate what the general plan calls the most significant undeveloped property in the community. The general plan states that any development that occurs should be consistent with the semi-rural of the community with respect to that specific property. And yet it's about to be obliterated because the city failed to respect what residents wanted. Do not do that here. There has to be integrity, fairness, honesty, forthrightness. Lafayette residents have spoken loudly and clearly. We are entitled to honor our semi-rural origins as values. However vague you might personally think those concepts are. Figure out how to say it and say that term, semi-rural. If you do not, there is no integrity to this process.
Okay. Thank you, Elliot.
Are we allowed to ask questions or is that not?
I think we can.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I just had one question about those 200 responses. I saw them and I was like, ooh, what are these? Are they like a survey that you took amongst your community, or were they from the other surveys? I was just not sure.
Yes, they're the survey that you took. They are the community's value survey that was conducted from May to July. And I have exported them into a table so that they're easy to collect and you don't have to go down 888 and pick them out.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, thank you for doing that. It's much clearer too.
Thank you. It took a lot of time, but to make the point, I was happy to do it.
Okay. Yeah, it was a big effort. Thank you, Elliot. Okay, other comments?
Grace Dixon is in the meeting.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for all of your hard work. I am here as an advocate for Parks and Recreation and Trails, although I am speaking as a private citizen. I have sent in my suggestions for the mission statement and the guiding characteristics, but I will read them into the record. And know that my main objective is that Parks and Recreation will be equitably applied throughout the city and will be especially accessible to underserved and low income and high density populations, because Parks and Recreation are not equitably applied throughout Lafayette currently. And it's not the fault of Parks and Rec, they have tried, but we all need to be a part of the solution to make sure that Parks and Recreation are accessible to all. So here's my suggestions for the mission statement and guiding characteristics. For the mission statement, Lafayette is a safe, family-friendly city in which to grow up, live, work, play, and grow older. I do want to include the older population specifically. It values excellent schools, an active downtown, preserved open spaces, hills, and ridge lines, and equitable access to parkland, creeks, and trails for recreation. Lafayette engages residents, community groups, and business owners to work with the city government to ensure that Lafayette remain a highly desirable small town community. And then for guiding characteristics, and again, I was disappointed, so disappointed, that even though Parks and Trails was second in the survey that you did, Parks and trails isn't even mentioned in guiding characteristics. The word trails isn't anywhere in the mission or characteristics. And it really needs to be there. And it needs to be equitable, and it needs to be accessible for everyone. So here's my suggestions for guiding characteristics. Ensure equitable access to parks and recreation for all ages and abilities. Okay. Now, like I said, this is to better reflect the community's value of parks, as parks is second only to safety in the GPAC survey. Parks is second only to infrastructure. And by the way, parks are also infrastructure in the ARPA survey. And parks need to be included in the guiding principles and the mission statement, and recreation needs to be accessible to all. Thank you so much. I know you guys are working extremely hard, but this really needs to happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Grace. Other comments?
Robert Lavoie will become part of the meeting.
Hello again. Let's see, shoot, I just lost my screen. Okay. I want to say thank you for all the hard work. I know how difficult it must be to try and merge all these comments from diverse opinions into the document. And I think it's gotten a lot closer. I agree with Elliot that the semi-rural is really critical, and it's how we've got our city to the way it is today. And I see it as being infused into almost all of these elements that you guys have talked about. We talk about safe, and people in small towns, semi-rural, their kids run around, they go downtown without supervision. A lot of people don't lock their doors. Those are characteristics of the small town model that we're trying to continue. Talking about all ages, semi-rural community. I mean, don't you picture your grandma, lots of kids, good schools, quaint downtown. I would like to ask a question. If you guys could just explain a little bit about what the mission is related to visitors. Is that related to making the businesses sustainable? Then that would make sense to me. Otherwise, I don't quite understand what their relation is to our mission.
That was part of it, Robert. We're a city that are connected to lots of other cities by both freeways, BART, trails, and things such as that. And yes, our commerce depends on people visiting the city. We have visitors also that come here to be with families, walk downtown, do some of our public events like the Art and Wine Festival. And this touched on the diversity issue because we've heard stories, and I've seen more of them than I like to remember, my connection with the chamber, of people that came from out of town visit here, and frankly, people kind of knew they didn't belong here, or they didn't live here, excuse me, and they got treated poorly. And so it also touches on the diversity, Robert, of being a welcoming town that doesn't differentiate between people that live here, whether you're an owner, a renter, a business owner, but that visitors are a part of this, and they ought to be treated with respect and dignity. So that was kind of the thoughts that went into it, Robert.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that clarification. And I think, again, the semi-rural characteristic is, we're different than the other towns around us. You don't see walls of concrete. When you go hiking on the trail, there's grass around you, there's open spaces, you can see the hills. Our downtown is specifically limited to 35 feet, or it used to be, so that you could see, the hills and so forth from the roads and the walkways and so forth. And I think that's what draws people to us. And let's see, also, wondered if somebody could clarify a little bit about the sustainability and what that means in terms of, how that relates to infrastructure. And let me finish my other points and then maybe you guys can talk about that. Let's see. I would like to just related to those views of the open spaces and hills. I think, that stating that in this mission helps us to push back against the people that want to do this density that's going to be packing buildings 5 feet apart and 50 feet tall. So I think that's really critical to maintaining the character that we have. And then I would encourage you guys to consider including the limited services along with the conservative fiscal policy, supporting small city staff. I just don't think we want to become a city like Berkeley and San Francisco that are activists and the government's meddling in everything and that our taxes go through the roof. So that's why I look at that as sort of small town, minimal government impact, and let's, just stay small. And the good schools, supporting the good schools, I think, again, that says, we've got to fight back against these excessive RENA allocations, which could increase housing 25%, generate 40% increase in residents, and double the school population, which would do exactly the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. So I think that's it for now.
Yeah, on the environmental sustainability, Robert, to answer your question, it's a very broad term. And I think over time, it will change as technology and our understanding of how to support the environment and, address our aspect of global warming evolves. And we would expect the commissions and committees to make specific recommendations that would help in that area. So for example, with Stella's commission, it could be more ability to ride your bike safely and walk safely downtown instead of driving. That could be one example that could be done in that way.
I guess
maybe more solar support than has been in the past, but we're not trying to dictate the policy specifically because I think it's going to change over time. But that's what we were getting at, Robert, to answer your question.
Okay. Yeah, I guess those are like specific policies and they should be debated and vetted and not codified in a mission document. So that's, I guess, my concern is I don't want to see something codifying, reducing the access to our stores and so forth. If you want to have seniors be able to go to Safeway, you got to have parking for them because they're not going to ride their bike down there.
Yeah, and that's once again, that goes back to the point of trying not to have this dictate policy, but giving people broad parameters of how they do things.
Great. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Robert. Other comments?
I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, give it just a sec. All right, so maybe I'll pull it back. And Matt, I think I want to go back to where you started with this, which is we have received a number of comments, probably mainly in the October draft, but we have this new version out. And we've certainly heard folks offer their suggestions for this November version. I think the idea is that the subcommittee will get together again and go through them all, with the idea being that we'll shoot to get something back to the group so we can hopefully wrap this up at our December meeting. And I will note that that December meeting will be about on the anniversary of when the council asked the GPAC to take a look at the mission statement. So it will have taken us a year on this schedule, but we will hopefully got it done. And the council can deal with this after they take care of SB 9. Matt or Namratha, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add to this?
Not for me.
Okay, Namratha?
I'm good.
Okay. And I would say, I think we're kind of done with this item. What I would say is, sincerely, we do appreciate all the thoughtful comments that people have provided to this. I sat in on the PTR session. There's we've had all sorts of different conversations with different individuals, not all of whom see alike on this. But I think what underlies that is that there's a real love for this community. And it kind of touches on, I think, something Chris mentioned at the outset, where it's a great place to be, where people care so much about this place we call home. And we're hopeful that we can kind of wrap it up in a way where people think that what we've come up with here is a fair statement, and the council can then do what it will with it. So with that, that wraps up the presentations. We have housekeeping. And I've got 2 items for housekeeping, and there may be others as well. But one is we've got our next scheduled meeting on, I believe it's December the 21st. That would be our normal schedule. I think we're looking at the 14th.
We previously voted on that and decided.
Okay, great. Well, the rest of you are ahead of me on that. The one thing I do want to mention is that given everything that's coming at us here on the housing element, and once we finish with that, we've got the opportunity sites again. We've got RENA. Don't know to what extent we get involved with AB 2923 and the BART stuff, but there's a lot that's happening in the first half of 2022. And I think that we ought to be thinking about meeting twice a month again. And I would suggest we do that starting in January. Otherwise, I really don't know how we get through all this and keep the production line going so we can get things off to the Planning Commission on a timely basis, because I don't want to have them get backed up or the council get backed up. We need to sort of do our part in this. So I think maybe what we could do is at the December meeting, chart out the maybe meetings for the first quarter of 2022. But I think the expectation is we're going to shift to twice a month, and maybe we do it kind of on the schedule we did last time around, which just keep Tuesdays, but it's I guess the 1st and 3rd or something like that. So I just kind of want to put that out there because I think that's where we're going to need to go. No. Any other housekeeping items that people want to raise for the good of the order?
When will we be able to meet in person?
That's a good one. Oh, that's.
We can meet at City Hall, but we got to wear masks, and which is kind of a drag when classes all fog up. I don't know. I mean, Sarah, I don't know if you have any insight on that you could share. We'd love to finally meet some people in this group.
It looks like Mayor Kendall has her hand.
Oh, I do see. Thank you, Mayor Kendall. Maybe she's got the answer for us.
Partially. So I have another housekeeping item. But on that one, we are trying. We've slotted. We believe we're going to vote on it at our next meeting to have some of our ARPA funds go towards trying to support hybrid meetings.
Oh.
Right. And so if you do meet in person, there will still be a way for remote access. And that is what we're aiming towards. And so you guys obviously can have it in person. We've chosen as council, we don't want to do that yet because we want to get it to be hybrid before we go back in person. So that's a choice for you guys as well.
Mm-hmm.
What does hybrid mean? Some of us can stay home and be there, or you mean just for the public? And
oh no, you can stay. Council. We are going to try to work on it. So we would have to have at least 3 council members present, but that means that like maybe 2 of you can be remote, as well as the public being able to be either in person or remote.
So I guess for us, that would be 5 in person. That's quorum.
Right.
All right. So that's something to think through. Maybe after I get my booster shot, I might be ready for all that. So, okay. And Mayor Kendall, you had a housekeeping item, I think, for us.
I do. I just want to say this is my last meeting with you guys.
No.
That's right. So we decided, but it's a really good plan where we rotate mayor and vice mayor through the position. And so by the end of all your processes, we'll all be really well educated. And so I really support this, but I'm going to miss you guys. I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh,
We should have got you a bottle of that tear-filled wine.
No, it's all good. Chris did all the work.
Okay, well, thank you for the heads up
We'll
on
miss
that.
you
That's
too.
right, I knew that. And thank you. Yeah, you've been a very active member. You provide us with very helpful insight. And, you know, you'll be missed. I know Vice Mayor Geringer has been a trooper dialing in on all this, so we're looking forward to working with her. But thank you for your contribution. It's been
yes.
immeasurable.
Thank you very much. Let's give her a
Thank
round
you.
of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to miss you guys, honestly.
You're just saying that.
No.
I think there's one last item, maybe staff updates that I see on the list. Sarah, did you want to flag something for us on that?
Yeah, and it's actually me.
Thank you, Renata.
So I just wanted to bring the attention to the GPAC because we had discussed way back when we started this process in incorporating diversity, equity, inclusion throughout the entire general plan, that the Acalanes Unified School District, along with the community DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, I believe is the B, committee will be hosting a conversation on race and equity on November 18th at the library. So if you're available and interested, would recommend participating. Just I think it will bring together some different voices. So if you're able to, maybe check it out.
Thank you. And that's a live session. It's not like Zoomed or anything, right?
Yeah, I believe it's in person at the library.
Wow, old school. Okay, great. Thank you. Unless there's any.
I'll be there. I'm sorry. I'll be there if anybody,
Beth?
if you want me to convey anything.
I'm sorry.
Participating.
Beth, I think that's you. I think there's a real bad connection because oh, okay. I'm gonna try it again.
Internet's bad.
Want to try it again?
I have a bad connection. I'll be at the DEI meeting on Thursday.
Great. Okay.
Oh, great.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much. That was a very productive session. I appreciate your time. And we look forward to all those comments coming in.
Yeah, I'll be at the DEI meeting on Thursday night.
I think we have a ghost of Beth out there.
Appreciate your time. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, Chris.